IB Nation, welcome to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. We are live here on a Friday, which means it's time for some Friday Free for All Mailbag. I want to thank everybody so much for being with us today. Ton of questions. We are sitting here just a minute into the show, and we have 46 questions that are already highlighted to be able to hit on today. So I want to thank you all so much. And for people that have never been on Mailbag before, hit an MB in front of the question. Make sure that we can kind of articulate between what is a mailbag question and what is not. Also,
It's just a
quick
comment.
reminder. Yes, comments.
Yeah.
Also, before we start, Ryan Roberts, Brian Driscoll, of course, here on a Friday, want to remind everybody, we'll also be having a special live show this weekend, okay? This weekend, Saturday, Bronte Johnson, star defensive back out of Northside High School in the state of Indiana, will be picking between Notre Dame, Tennessee, and Purdue. We obviously feel pretty good about where Notre Dame's stake is in that race as of today. So tomorrow he is scheduled to make his commitment at 10 a.m. Eastern time. Me and Brian have had a little bit of a discussion of when the best time would be for a live show. The two options on the table right now are 10 o'clock or somewhere around noon or 1 o'clock Eastern. Obviously, the pluses and minuses to both is the plus for the 10 o'clock would be that we're live as soon as the decision is made. So we're, an instant reaction type of situation. 12 or 1 o'clock, more people have time to get up out of bed because it's a Saturday morning, right? So
Including
whatever
us.
the coverage is, yes.
You have a newborn, so not us or me.
Yes. Yes. So if you're subscribed to us at boards.irishbreakdown.com, I actually put a poll on the board before we started here and hoping to get a lot of responses there. So make sure before you leave the show today, hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, hit that notification bell because we're not 100% sure when we'll be doing the Bronte Johnson decision commitment show tomorrow, but it will be tomorrow. So make sure you hit that notification bell so that you know that when we're doing that. Brian, what's up, man? It's been a little while. How's everything?
Yeah, man. It's going good. It's going good. I should ask you that question. I'm not the one dealing with a toddler and newborn. So how are you doing?
I'm absolutely wonderful, man. Juliet pooped on the potty 2 days in a row, so we're moving in the right direction, man.
We're moving that potty training. It's it's a little tougher for you than it is for me. I can just make mine go outside in the yard. People might look at you funny if you try to do that with yours. So,
man. Well, it's the funniest thing in the world right now is Juliet's asking me where everyone poops, which is pretty funny. He's like, our dog Nova. Okay. Nova poops outside? Yes, babe. Yeah. Nova poops outside. I don't poop on grandma's floor. No, babe, you don't poop on grandma's floor. That's very much correct. So, yeah, man, it's wild times, but we're excited, obviously, to get going here on a Friday. Again, we already have 48 questions start in this podcast. So, Brian, whenever you're ready, man.
We'll start off with a super chat, man. Let's get started with a super chat from Rob Osgood.
And Rob says, Rob, thank you so much for the super chat. We really much appreciate it. And as always, guys, talking about recruiting, can you briefly describe the process about recruiting from start to finish? Wow, that's a lot one. Just curious about the steps involved and most important elements. Thank you so much.
Well, Rob, I'm going to give you a very basic overview of this because we could literally, Ryan, remember a couple weeks ago when we started, actually, it was a show with Vince where the first topic took preseason top 10 teams took 48 minutes. I don't want to do that with this show. So Rob, basically there's an identification process, identifying who the guys are going to be on your board. Then it goes from that to, narrowing the list down over time, which happens in a lot of different ways. There's some kids you have to eliminate because they don't fit a certain profile. So, man, I love this offensive lineman on film, but he's 6'1.5", 250. Right. I mean, that's just not going to fit it. Boy, I really like this kid, but he runs a 12-1 100-meter dash, right? It's just not going to work for us. This kid doesn't fit academically. This kid, whatever the case may be. And so you start to narrow it down through just the initial information gathering process, right? Once you start to narrow your board down, you start to sort of rank the board, in most teams, Ryan, I don't know if it's like this in the NFL or not, but I know it's like this in college. At most positions, it's not so much here's my number one, here's my number two, here's my number three, but more so, sort of like A group, B group, C group, and so if we're going to take three receivers, we've got our A group of 7 guys and we want to get ideally 3 from there, but at least 2 from there. And then, that that type of process. And then you're always moving that around. So, a guy like Ben Minich as a sophomore is going to be in your B or C group, but when he comes to camp and dominates a camp and then goes out, he all of a sudden now moves up into your A group. So you're always evolving the process, which comes as you gather film and watch more film and get to know these prospects more and those type of things. So there's always an evolution to that process. And that comes down, that's part of all the evaluation stuff. So once you kind of start to do the evaluation aspects of it, then it comes down to the relationship building. And when this is ultimately what determines whether you will or will not get a prospect, the evaluation part determines who's going to be on your board. And so then it's the relationship. So it's first getting to know the kid, right? And it's, hey, initial context. Hey, we're interested in you. We'd like to get to know you. Then it's, hey, let's dive into the relationship part, because you need to find out what kind of young man this is. Is this someone who, as you've gotten to know him over time, and this is what can get risky when you get guys late in the process, because you don't always have as much time to evaluate that part of it. And that's where you've got to rely a little bit on coaches that and high school coaches and other coaches. But you get into what kind of character does this young man have? How does this young man handle adversity? How does he treat his parents? How does he treat people at the school? What kind of teammate is he? All that kind of stuff is important to that evaluation process, but also the relationship building process. A lot of people focus on the trust that coaches have to earn in players, but there's also a level to this if you're recruiting well, where that player has to earn your trust as well during the recruiting process. And so that happens over time. Then you get into, okay, let's get them on campus for visits. You want to try to get a kid on campus as early as possible for two reasons. Number one is you want to size him up. What does this kid look like physically? I know what he's listed at. I know what I think he is on film, but let me see the kid in person. And then the other part is you get to be around him and stuff, but then also you let him see who you're about and what your program's about. He sees what a game day is like. He sees what a practice is like, or what depending on when he comes, and you start to build the relationship from there. Then you get closer to the official visit process. Once the official visit process starts to happen, you have already kind of gone through a lot of academic stuff as well. This kid's got his transcripts in. He's applied to the school. He's gone through the admissions process to enough of a degree that you feel comfortable with, hey, this kid's going to be able to get into school. That's all part of it as well. And then it just comes down to relationship building. And Ryan talked a lot about this. I think it was on the Monday show when we were going through the different players, about how the relationship has evolved over time and where they are. And we talked about the closing process. Ryan, remember that question I got asked? And that's what a lot of the final piece is. It's just knowing what is needed to close on a prospect, because it's different. It's not the same for every kid. And that all comes from the relationship building. So the relationship building then determines, okay, what's our plan of attack, so to speak, on closing on this kid. And then you try to close. And if a kid commits somewhere else, you have to decide, is he someone we want to stay on because we like him, or is it a kid that we're ready to move on from? So that's basically what I believe are and part of that relationship building is also building relationship with those people around him that are going to influence the decision. If it's a parent, a guardian, a coach, a grandparent, a brother, all the different people that are going to influence a young man's decision, you need to get to know those people as well. Not just so they can influence him, but it's going to tell you a lot about who he is and what kind of relationship that you're going to be building with him. That's all part of the process as well. So that's, to me, how a relationship is built. All right, we have a question here from Nathan Milton. Were you ever a fan of BK? If so, when did you lose support for him? For me, the last straw was when he had the altercation with David Grimes. Was I a fan of him? I think in that standpoint from what you're asking, if I was a fan of him, I would say, yeah, I thought he was the guy that they should have hired when they made the hire in 2010. I thought that he was a guy that could lead Notre Dame to a higher level, and in a lot of ways he did. And look, I didn't like Brian Kelly personally, but he also, and I think that there were things he did that hurt the program, that kept the program from reaching its full potential. But he also did a lot of good things as well at Notre Dame and had a lot of wins, and it wasn't by accident, right? I mean, so he did a lot of good things, but I don't know that there was necessarily, Nathan, a moment where I stopped supporting him, because that to me is more of an emotional reaction, and I have to not be that way. I can't have emotional reactions. I can have an emotional reaction at a time, but it can't be something that because I had this emotional reaction, my opinion is here and I'm not going to change. There was a lot of different things. How he treated assistant coaches was something I wasn't a big fan of. His unwillingness to admit mistakes. I mean, this is for years with a lot of different ways, whether it was assistant coach hires, whether it was, personnel mistakes, game mistakes, the whole, hey, this is who I am, get used to it thing was just such an arrogant, and I think that was like in year one, was just an arrogant unwillingness to say, hey, you know what, like I didn't get that right. Like he honestly, like he felt like if he admitted to the media that, hey, this call wasn't good or this thing didn't happen, it's like somehow, I don't know, it was like beneath him to do that. And I never quite understood that. So instead he would come out with these outrageous responses. And, you think of the 2016, basically throwing Sam Mustipher under the bus because he couldn't consistently snap in the middle of a hurricane. When, there just was so much stuff that you look at. And then when you get to know the players and the parents and some of the assistant coaches, and you realize like, this is not a dude that's in it for the right reasons. He's in it for him. He's not in it for the people around him, for the edification and building up of the people around him. He was never that way, but he really lost his way down the stretch. And so those are some of the reasons that I would say I quote unquote lost support him. But I wouldn't say that it was because I didn't support him. It was just calling it like I see it. I mean, I think that's really what it boils down to. So the things that I thought he was responsible for, the not recruiting hard, all those the coaching hires, not being around for months at a time. It was more so, hey, this isn't the way that you win at a place like Notre Dame, and then calling somebody out for it. More so than, I stopped being a fan of him. If I thought if I just could not stand Marcus Freeman as a human being, if that were the case, but he was doing all the things you need to do to win, then I should say, hey, great job. If I think Marcus Freeman's the best human being on the planet, but he's not doing the job, then I need to be able to say he's not doing the job. I mean, at the end of the day, you're evaluating the job, not personalities. To the degree in which you evaluate personalities is to the degree, Ryan, to which it impacts the job that a coach is doing. I think that's the only way you really evaluate a personality now. I may not like him. And Ryan and I may say things off the air. Man, I can't stand this guy. But when it comes to the public analysis, a guy could be the biggest prick in the world, but if he's doing what he needs to do to win and run his program the way that the school hired him to run it, then you praise him for it. And if the guy's the nicest guy in the world, but he's not doing those things, then you have to be critical of it. And that's why I would say it's not so much about being a fan of something as much as it's just calling it like I see it. And that's what was so funny when Brian Kelly left, Ryan, because you started to see a lot of other people that had kind of, carried water for him for years start making the same complaints after the fact that I had been making for years that I would get crap for. And, worked out for us because I think that sent a lot of people to our channel. Like, hold on a second. Like you guys have been saying Driscoll's full of crap for years for saying these things. Now you're saying them now that Kelly's gone. Well, that means that this guy was being honest about it. And that's something that kind of helped us grow. But I don't know, Ryan, did you kind of have a moment where you're just like, man, I'm kind of over this guy? Or did you kind of always say, hey, this is the guy?
I had very mixed feelings with Brian Kelly. Like I respected him as a football coach when he first got to Notre Dame. I mean, I still respect him as a football coach. I still think he's a good football coach. But I think that to your question, Nathan, like, was I ever a fan of Brian Kelly? I wouldn't say a fan. No, I mean, he had my supports because I'm a fan of Notre Dame football, right? Like I want Notre Dame to be successful. Whoever is the head coach to lead them there is who they dawn to be the best head coach to be there. Pretty early on, Brian, in my opinion, like it didn't take me many times of listening to Brian Kelly to be like, man, he's not an incredibly likable person. Like it's just not, to be like, it got worse over time, obviously, because as you stack things on top, eventually things start caving in a little bit more, right? But I never really, I would say, was a fan of Brian Kelly. I respected Brian Kelly. I thought he was a good coach, and I hope that he could take Notre Dame to the highest of heights, obviously, during his tenure, because I am a fan of Notre Dame football. So I don't think there was one moment where I was like, man, I don't like that guy. I think it was just like a general of like, just hearing him talk. Like he just rubs me the wrong way. He always kind of has rubbed me the wrong way, to be honest. So I don't think there was like a one day it was just one final thing that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, I just think that's just was always kind of my feelings on him. Like, I think he's a good coach. I don't know if I necessarily think he's a great person. You know what I mean? Like, that's just kind of always how I've thought about Brian Kelly personally.
Speaking of it, Ryan, we do have this question from Archer452 that kind of relates to Brian Kelly-ish. So I want to address that, and then we can move on from it.
Archer's question: what do you think about the LSU sanctions from the NCAA? Multiple violations for both football and men's basketball, with football getting a 3-year probation, but having it backdated so it ends in 3 months.
I don't think that I'm a big believer, Ryan, that sanctions should be towards the people that committed the violations. And let's just say that the previous staff had done things that deserved really harsh punishment. Why would I support putting a team on probation that has since fired all those coaches that were responsible for it? So as far as I believe, none of the violations that were being investigated here had anything to do with the current basketball or football staff, right? Which is why I kind of do like the whole the rule. I forget what well, not the back day, but like the thing with the show calls for the basketball will wait. So like he's at McNeese State now. He's suspended for like 3 games, which is a joke, by the way. You know, so as long as it's, you know, like with the football team, for example, I don't think that the football team should have been put on probation because you're now punishing people that had nothing to do with whatever happened. So if you want to find the school, this is what I come down to. All this words, though, they mean nothing. Because what would probation mean? There's no loss of scholarships. There's no loss of TV appearances. There's no loss in revenue. There's no loss in bowl games. So what's the whole point of a probation? It's just a slap on the wrist so they can say that they did something. Now, so probation never means anything. It's what are the sanctions, basically. And you want to put this team on probation for 3 months. Okay, what does that accomplish? Who are you hurting? You know, and it's silly to me, to be completely honest with you. And so it's just it's typical NCAA. It's for show. Nothing will happen to LSU. Nothing. Right? If I'm reading the sanctions correctly, it's you know, there's no fines for lack of institutional control, all that kind of stuff. And you know, so for this particular case, I don't think it should have anything to do. If LSU, and there's a question down there kind of about this, if LSU is going to get in trouble for something now, it should be for something that the current staff does, not for something that people that have been fired. Now, if there's like 3 coaches on Brian Kelly's staff that were involved in those things, then sure, there now need to be some consequences. But as far as I know, I don't know that that I would support that. So I'm okay with it being that way. What they should do, Ryan, in this case is saying, hey, if they did something bad, then you fine them. I mean, that's, hey, you owe us $3 million, that kind of thing. And if the current coaches were still there, then you say, hey, you're not going to be on TV. You're not going to get bowl revenue, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, this is just another for show thing that the NCAA does.
Yeah. And we knew something at some point was coming. I mean, you had been hearing before Brian Kelly got there the football program specifically was not in a good situation, man. Like, there was a lot of shady stuff that has been happening at LSU for the last several years. So I'm not surprised that this came out. I agree with Brian. I think that it's not fair to penalize people for things that they didn't actually do, right? That would be very inappropriate, in my opinion, to subject people to, punishment for things that they weren't even involved in. So LSU was not in a good place from a discipline perspective, over the last few years. And hopefully, and I believe that the one thing that I'm certain with Brian Kelly is that he'll run a decently tight ship as far as, like, there's not going to be a lot of extracurricular inappropriate things happening like there was at LSU over the last few years. So
at least not as much, although there's a couple incidents we've heard
not as much
that you wonder about. So
yes, Ed O did not run the tightest ship of all time. No. John A1 with a question: which group of players are most essential to develop for the 2023 season? Junior, including redshirt or sophomores?
Sophomores to me, Ryan. I wrote an article about this the other day. Look, every class is important, right? I mean, you can't just say, well, this class, but, there's a level of expectation with the junior and senior class. Like the junior class, for example, is going to be very heavily involved, dominate the starting lineup on offense, for example. You're going to have a junior running back, a junior tight end. Two of your 3 starting receivers are likely going to be juniors, at least one. You're going to have juniors at right tackle, left tackle. You might end up eventually having a junior at right guard. We'll see. But at the end of the day, to me, the thing that's going to go put this team over the top or not is going to be the development of the sophomore class. That to me is going to be what determines how good this football team is going to be. When you look at just every position, I mean, Steve Angeli right now being in a position to be the backup quarterback, he's probably going to get called upon at some point in time this season. How's he going to handle it? Yep. You've got Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne, the importance for them to emerge at running back this year. Tobias Merriweather at wide receiver. Holden Stace, potentially Eli Raridan at tight end, Billy Schrouth at guard emerging. Obviously Benjamin Morrison's important. Jaden Mickey's going to be huge. If he steps up and has a big year this year as the number 3 guy, that's going to be huge for the defense. So you look at the linebackers, Nolan Ziegler and Jalen Sneed are going to be a very important piece of this whole thing. So to me, that's where it comes down to, Ryan, is that sophomore class is going to determine if this is a really good team or a potentially elite team. I think they need this sophomore class, especially, Morrison to continue doing what he's doing. They need Tobias Merriweather to step up and be big this year. If they're the best that this offense can be is going to include Holden Stace and Jadarian Price being legit potential playmakers, either as starters in Holden Stace's case or backups, and which could also be Holden Stace's case, and more so Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne. So and then of course you need Billy Schrouth to step up. So I really think the sophomore class, and if you really wanted to get technical, Ryan, you could say it's the sophomore class on offense more so than it is on defense. It's important on defense, but it's even more important on offense, like way more important on offense.
So if I'm including the red shirts into the junior conversation, I feel like I might lean juniors just slightly because, I mean, technically then we can include guys like Xavier Watts in as a junior, right? Because he would be a red shirt. We can include JD Bertrand in because he's technically a red shirt junior, right? Like we can include those guys.
Yeah, because he's a red shirt. He's a red shirt junior that's in a 50. How about this, Ryan? Because it gets the COVID stuff can get you. Let's go the more traditional red shirt juniors. So Xavier Watts is more of a traditional red shirt junior.
Yeah.
Not Jack Kaiser and JD Bertrand. But it still doesn't necessarily take away the point that you're trying to make.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because the way I look at it is that I agree with you because I think the biggest thing is that the sophomore class is going to take what you already know because that's more the known with a lot of the junior class and potentially take it over the top. I don't disagree with that at all. But I also believe that the junior class in general are your dudes this year, right? They're your guys that need to be the dudes. I mean, Joe Waltz of the world.
Joe Walt, Blake,
exactly. Like those are
Dion, Jaden Thomas, Mitchell Evans, right?
Yeah, those are your guys that you are going to most lean on when you need a big play to happen for the most part. Like those are your guys that you need to be money players. Like that's kind of where it is. So I would just, for the money player aspect of it, I might lean juniors, but I think sophomores is a very acceptable and very astute opinion, obviously, right there, right? Because again, I do think that those guys, because we always talk about it, what separates Georgia from some of the better teams the last couple of years? It's not that their number ones are that much better than everybody else's in college football. It's that their number twos are better. It's that their number threes are better. It's that they throw waves at you. Right. And Notre Dame's been missing that in some years of waves. You need waves.
But here's the thing too, Ryan, if you're going to include red shirts as part of the junior class, then you have to throw Blake Fisher into the sophomore class. That's the other part of it, right? So, I mean, because now you're putting two classes into one versus a class of one. So if we're going to go with the thought of it being red shirts, then I'm throwing Rocco Spindler and Blake Fisher into that sophomore conversation. I'm throwing Gabriel Rubio into that red shirt sophomore. Jason Onye now becomes a sophomore. So that's the other part of it too. Is I would rather take the red shirt part out of it if we're going to do that. But I just feel like
third year versus second year players.
Yeah. Because then you get into like, okay, if you want to, how are they going to be without Sam Hartman? So to me, it's more about if you assume that veterans play like veterans, then you really need that sophomore class to take you over the top. But like I said at the preface, all the classes are important. Like if the juniors and sophomores step up and ball out, but the veteran linebackers don't. If Riley Mills doesn't a D tackle, if Javante Jean-Baptiste, Cam Hart, those guys don't play well, Sam Hart doesn't play well, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good those young guys are. But
Agree.
They're going to be a young team, but what I like is that they're not needing the young guys to step up from a leadership standpoint. This is a very experienced football team. Coach Freeman, I'm going to I think it was in the article that I put up yesterday, but I'm trying to think, but he talked about this. I might not even have it in an article yet, but he talked about how like this is a team that's played a lot of football this year. Like we had a lot of guys last year that hadn't played a lot of football. Xavier Watts hadn't played a lot of football going into last year. Jordan Patel hadn't played a ton of football going into last year. Joe Walt had played a whole season, but half a year to start. Blake Fisher only played 2 games going into last year. Audric had 7 carries going into last year. Like I was having a conversation with a guy on the board who's a very smart football guy, and he was talking about how let's pump the brakes a little bit on the running backs. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not going to, because that's the nature of that position. Like look at Audric Estime. Does Jabron Payne have that much less experience than what Audric Estime played 18 snaps of offense as a freshman? He had 7 carries, and 6 of them came in a blowout win over Navy late in the year. Right?
He only had 5 more carries than Payne had last year. So
right, exactly. And then obviously Logan stepped in late in the year and played a little bit, but he had 269 something like that rushing yards in 2021.
Yep.
So the guys that broke out for you last year, between Logan Diggs and Audric Estime, had a combined, I'm going to do the math here real quick, had a combined 290 yards rushing for their careers coming into the year. And so his point was, we have some guys that are young if you look at it from a youth standpoint, but we have a lot of guys that have played a lot of football.
Yeah.
And much more so than last year. Even some of them that are here that weren't here that are here that weren't. I mean, Benjamin Morrison and Jaden Mickey were very important players. They played a lot of minutes for the secondary last year. They were true freshmen. So a much more experienced team this season than they were a year ago. There's no doubt about it.
Next question is from Travis Patterson. Thank you, Travis. What are your thoughts on LSU's air-conditioned helmets? I personally don't like them, but wanted your thoughts, input. I have not seen this. I don't know what this is.
Yeah, so they have this new air-conditioned helmet. Look, to me, the whole thing is that would be something that would be have to. I think it's kind of, just the thought of it's kind of corny. I would be very concerned about the science of it. That would be the whole thing for me. Like I would want to talk to medical people, doctors, like, hey, is there value when they're out there playing in the middle of a game to have their bodies heated up, but their heads cooled? They may say, hey, yeah, this is actually good, and here's why it does this, it does that, it does the other thing. My non-science background thought would be, I don't know if if that's a good idea, where it's just like your head's cold. I don't know what the ramifications would be if potentially what are the pieces in your helmet that are making that. Is there a chance that a hard hit could break one of those things and shove a broken? There's so many health injury questions that I would have that I would need to have answered for it. But if medically it makes a lot of sense and health-wise it makes a lot of sense, then it's good for players to have that, then fine. If it's just something you're doing because it sounds cool, then, I get so sick of the superficial stuff, like the Texas. And I know kids like it, but I hate it. I think it's shallow and petty when the kids go on a visit at Texas and they got all these really expensive cars there. I'm like, this is what your program's about, huh? This is what it's about, expensive cars. Not, hey, how I'm going to build you up as a young man. And I get sick of that shallow stuff, right? The superficial stuff. And it's because the kids love it, but are you really I understand you have to, so it's a double-edged sword, but at what point in time do the adults say, no, we're not going to act like 17-year-olds. We're going to try to build them up. And I know that's a soapbox. I'm not going to get on that today, but I like substance, man. And if there's good substance to this, and medically you have people saying, look, here's why this is good, and this is what this does for players, and this is why this is smart, and that's smart, then I'm all for it. If it's going to improve the welfare of student athletes, then I'm all for it. If it's just a for show thing, then stop wasting my time on stuff that doesn't matter. That's the way I look at it.
I need to look into this, man. I have not seen this helmet at all. So
it's pretty interesting.
It's interesting. It's very interesting. I have no idea if it works and how it works and all the in betweens of that conversation, but it's very Oh man, I don't even know. I kind of miss the days, though, Brian, of getting overheated and you run into the water sprinkler thing coming off the fence and just getting it on your neck and then running back out. I don't know. I guess
one Notre Dame used to have this thing where they would have hats like in this kind of like it was like an ice water, but it had like, I don't know if it had like different chemicals in it, but they would throw the hats
Yeah.
on the sideline, and it would just like have this like, just this cold water because the hats were soaked. And I thought that was pretty interesting. But look, to me, it's all about what is what you're doing promoting a healthier way and a safer way to play football, then I'm all for it.
Yeah.
If it's just a for show thing, then you're wasting my time.
I would think if something that would like cool the neck would be a little bit more
Yeah.
like reasonable, but I don't know.
Right.
Whatever.
I just don't know, like when you're in the middle of exerting yourself, is it healthy or not?
Yeah.
Is it safe or not? And I don't know the answer to
Sure.
that. That's why I'd say is I would have to rely on the medical people and the doctors and, people like that. I would just have a lot of questions, and they'd have to convince me that this is safe and healthy for players.
Have you ever seen the Junction Boys?
Yes.
I don't know why, but I just
that
thought
was
about
with Tom Berenger.
yeah, I was just thinking about how the world has changed so much since that to
Some
now.
of it's not good. A lot of it is good.
A lot
You
of
know
it
what I
is
mean?
very
Like,
good,
yeah.
but yes, to your point, yeah.
Yeah. Like you need to be able to push athletes. Like the danger that I have, Ryan, is that we go so far in this player safety thing that we end up going too far to where we're now putting them in danger because we're not doing enough to push them past their limits, right? Or their perceived limits, right? I mean,
It's like
which
like
not
the
only
bubble
builds
boy
up your
thing.
body, but builds up your mind, the mental toughness aspect of it. Like we need to be able to have that balance to where you're not being so protective of them that we're doing a disservice to them because we're not pushing them to where they need to. It just maybe leads to more injuries and things like that. But then there's just the extreme opposite view of that, you know what I mean? Of what was happening back then with those happening, not giving water as a punishment or things like that. Like so it's good that we've come a long way because not everything that's new is good and not everything that's old was bad, and you've got to find that balance. Say, hey, look, we're going too far in this direction, and we don't ever want it to be like that, but there was some value to it, right? And we need to make sure that we're finding that happy medium when it comes to those type of things. But yeah, that I'd have quit. There's no way I would have put up with that. None.
Oh, I would have quit too. I probably would have punched someone in the face and then quit. But yeah,
I would have punched the head coach in the face, and then yes, exactly.
Like Bryant, yeah.
He'd have called a
Question
couple.
from Jordan Schreiber. Jordan, thank you so much. What was the significance banquets used to play in Notre Dame? Wait, what is the significance? Oh, sorry. What was the significance that banquets were used to play in Notre Dame recruiting? How did a banquet inspire recruits to commit? I remember banquets being long, boring. And when did banquets for recruiting end?
Well, first of all, banquets with Lou Holtz are not boring. And anything like that with Lou Holtz is not boring. Look, it was more of the banquet weekend, Jordan. It wasn't like the kids showed up for the banquet and all the wheeling and dealing was done and convincing was done during the banquet and then they went home, right? The season and so what he's referring to is for a long time, especially under the Lou Holtz era, the main recruiting weekends were postseason team banquets, which were usually done in December. And so players would come in, that'd be their official visit weekend. You'd have these huge lists of players. And essentially that was your guys you were going to try to finish for when you signed in February. So the main the closing was really done in the final 2 months leading up to signing day. That was really when a lot of it was done. And Notre Dame's was a lot of times built around the banquet. Well, during the Lou Holtz era, that made a lot of sense because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm around all these great players and they just had this great season. But it was an official visit weekend. So like around the banquet was all the other stuff that you do on an official visit. You take the tours, you do all this kind of stuff. And that's really what it boiled down to is they just, and when did it end? I mean, during the Brian Kelly era, the banquet was still something they used for recruiting. It ended essentially when recruiting stopped being a thing. Like late recruiting stopped being a thing is really when it ended. When most of your class is filled up before the season starts, the banquets no longer have the same impact. And so what the recently that Notre Dame decided to do is make the banquet about the team. They'll have some recruits sometimes in on campus, but that's more of a weekend for the players. And then have, the official visitors come later if they're going to. But it was really just about having the weekend around the pomp and circumstance of that event in your postseason recognition and all that kind of stuff. It was more about the official visits. But that's just how recruiting was done, Ryan. It was, You didn't have a ton of kids coming in during the season for games. I mean, they would, but they weren't doing like official visit weekends during the season a ton. It was a lot of it was just after the season. The recruiting calendar was much different back then. So it was just a different universe. And like what inspired recruits to commit, it wasn't that. It was like it wasn't like these 50 kids showed up. None of them had interest in Notre Dame. They just had nothing better to do that weekend but to come to the banquet, and then they were inspired to recruit. It was they've been being recruited by the staff for a while. That was their visit period. It's no different than what we're doing in June, right? Right. It's no different than what's going on now in June. It was just done instead of around summer camps and summer workouts. It was done around the postseason banquet. That's really what it boiled down to. So same process, just a different schedule. Yeah.
I think it's kind of cool experience for a recruit, though, to be able to see that, right? I mean, obviously it's changed, obviously, the format and when recruiting matters and kind of in the process, but you have to think it'd be pretty cool of a prospective athlete to really see how everyone reacts and interacts and just kind of those little intricacies of being a part of the program. I think that's kind of neat. I really do think that's kind of cool, actually. I was a banquet guy, though. Like, I got to sit in on the banquet when I went down the All-American Bowl in San Antonio, and I thought it was so cool, man. Like, all these guys getting recognized and eating, and just neat. I think it's neat.
Agree. All right, Ryan, I'm going to ask this question of you. John A1 says, Ryan, Marcus Freeman has just hired you as defensive coordinator, linebackers coach. Going into fall camp, what would your defensive philosophy be? Which player or players are you building around, and what's your big picture schematic approach?
I mean, John, it's such a difficult question. I mean, for me, I look at it and I say, I mean, one, what do I believe in? Because I think that your philosophy has to be spurred off of your belief. There is a very fine line, though, in my opinion, of what you believe in and what you're comfortable with, but also knowing what your team does really well, right? And you have to mesh those things together. For me, I'm a 4-2-5 guy. I always have been. I talked about this many times. I was obsessed with the best years of the Gary Patterson era in TCU and being able to learn about the 4-2-5 and adjustments off of it and umbrella coverages and a bunch of different kind of nuances to that. So 4-2-5 is actually what Notre Dame runs now. So I don't think schematically I would be a ton different. I think philosophically I would be a little bit different, right? For me, last year, the troubling areas of Notre Dame's defensive system was they felt like they could not get home with 4 at times, and they had to manufacture a lot of pressure. Manufacturing pressure, by me saying that, is I have to blitz a bunch of extra second-level defenders. I mean, how many times did we see a linebacker blitz last year and wasn't able to get home because it was poorly timed? So for whatever reason, and I mean, not for whatever reason, for the reason that Notre Dame last year, Al Golden last year, thought that he couldn't consistently get home with 4, right? Isaiah Foskey and the 4-down defensive linemen, they felt like they couldn't get home with 4 consistently. So they had to manufacture a bunch of pressure. I'm interested to see if that changes this year, because I will say this, and I don't know Al Golden. I've never talked ball with Al Golden. So I don't know if he believes this, but I know most defensive minds that I have spoken to and some very smart people that I've talked believe something similar, that I would rather not blitz. And as a defensive guy, I would rather not blitz. I would rather not. Being able to have things in your back pocket to turn to when you need it most, that's what a defensive coordinator wants to have, right? Like, I want to be able to play base and mix up coverages and just try to confuse people. I don't want to have to blitz out of necessity. I want blitzing to be a thing that I can go to when I want to go to it. So I think it's just kind of bullets in the chamber, right? Like, I want as many bullets as possible so that I have a better opportunity and a better option of hitting a target. Like, that's the biggest thing for me. So I would be a 4-2-5 still. I would be more situational with where my pressure packages are come from. I would love to do some post-snap switch as far as post-snap adjustments from coverage perspective. I don't like showing what coverage I'm playing to begin the game, right? I want to make opposing quarterbacks, especially in this era, I want to make them confused. So I'm not going to show the coverage a lot pre-snap. I'm going to roll post-snap a lot. I'm going to throw out some combination coverages because I think that those things are very vital. I mean, on the high school level, most of these quarterbacks are in these coverages, and they understand what cover 2 looks like, what 2-man looks like, what cover 1 looks like, what 0, even some know what like cover 6 is, for instance, right? But then you start getting into the combination coverages that got where you're a coverage on one side compared to the other, or you're playing match coverage where zone can turn into man. I want to be more influential and more experimental with that side of the defensive coin. So 4-2-5, a lot of different coverage adjustments. I don't want to have to be a blitz heavy team if I don't want to be. And for me, who would I build off of? Like, I mean, I think in 2023, I think the biggest asset that you'll have from a name perspective is that you will have 2 corners that will allow you to be very coverage versatile and will allow you to have a lot of man-to-man principles, which is always a plus. Because if I do want to bring second-level pressure, the best time to do that is when you're ability to play man coverage on the back end. I think Notre Dame's going to have that. So I'm building around the corners. I'm building around the defensive line because I still think that if they're an attack-style front, I think that they have a lot of upside to creating pressure. I think Jordan Botelho, Riley Mills in his position out inside, I believe they can make a lot of plays on the football. So I'm going to be aggressive up front. I'm not going to be incredibly blitz happy, and I'm going to be versatile in the back end from a coverage perspective. And that's also going to work out of the 4-2-5 base and easy adjustments off of it.
Good stuff. We have some super chats down here, Ryan, as well. Let's get to a few of these here real quick.
First super chat is from Kevin O'Neill. Thank you so much, Kevin. Outside of the big 3 games this season, where do you think Notre Dame has the highest chance for a slip-up? Absolutely love the mailbag, fellas. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate that.
Yes, thanks, Kevin. I think there's to me, there's 4 games that I look at, Ryan, that I would say if I'm a Notre Dame fan of a potential slip-up, and I'll just go chronological order, but it's NC State on the road because it's still early in the season. Your coaches are still kind of newish on offense. Your coordinator is anyway. Tony Gibson has a really interesting defensive game plan. Sam Hartman knows that defense, but they also know Sam Hartman, right? And so I would slightly give that particular edge to Notre Dame because they don't know Sam Hartman in this offense as much, but he knows that defense more. I think, Ryan, when you look at the talent NC State has, they have enough weapons. I think the hiring of Robert Anae to be the offensive coordinator is going to make them a lot better on offense than they were last year. Will it be enough by week 3? We'll find out, but he's got a quarterback that knows that offense, right? I mean, that's the key. So that'll be a test. And then Duke obviously is going to be a test, not just because of the team that Duke is and it being on the road, but also it's coming right after Ohio State and the potential emotional letdown that could happen either way. You either have an emotional letdown because you won and all that relief that comes from it, and then you overlook Duke, or the emotional letdown because you lost, and that part of that too. I'd say Louisville's obviously next chronologically. I do think Louisville's going to be a tougher test this year than they would have been if they still had Scott Satterfield as the head coach. I would chalk that up as a sort of like Stanford. If Scott Satterfield's there, I had no faith that he would win a big game. Jeff Brom, much better. He'll have better athletes immediately. The minute he gets there, he's already going to have better athletes than what he had at Purdue for the most part. And then the next one's Pitt for me. I think they're always a scrappy team. I don't think that they're going to be good enough to beat Notre Dame at home if Notre Dame remotely plays their game, but you got to earn that one. Those are the ones for me. If Stanford had a better quarterback, I'd say that would be one to keep an eye on. Late in the year, good offensive system. I just don't think they have enough firepower at the skill positions, and then not having a quarterback that can really get the job done. So that's why they're not in my group. But those would be the 4, Ryan, that I look at and say, you've got to win all of them, but those would be the 4 I'd be most concerned about after the big 3.
Duke and Pittsburgh are my 2 biggest ones, and you mentioned them, obviously. I think Duke, for the reasons that we've talked about, Notre Dame has had some trouble with dual threat quarterbacks, guys that can make things happen outside of structure a little bit, and that's Riley Leonard's game. I mean, he ran for 700 yards and 10 touchdowns last year quietly for Duke. I think that Duke is well coached defensively, and I think they have a really good quarterback. So when you have those 2 things together, always got to be mindful of it. And then Pittsburgh, for the same reason you said, Brian, like they're one of those teams where, are they more talented than Notre Dame? Absolutely not. Are they even that talented overall? No. But one thing that Pittsburgh does is they're tough and they're pretty well coached, and they'll make the difficult things difficult, and they'll make the easy things a little bit harder. Like, it's just going to be one of those situations where you don't usually give me's against Pittsburgh, right? Like, you usually got to work for it a little bit. Like, they're not just going to let you roll them over because you're just so much more physically gifted than them. Like, they're going to make you work to beat them handedly. Like, they're going to make you work. So Pittsburgh for making you work, and then Duke with a very athletic, good quarterback, and also a well-coached defense with Mike Elko. I think those are two of the biggest recipes outside the NC State game, in my opinion.
I just have to pull this up because I think this is absolutely hilarious. This is from Jared Grace, former Notre Dame player. Jared said, my grandpa played football at University of Tennessee in 1955. He quit because all freshmen did was run and get yelled at. He quit and joined the Army. Ha. And it says a lot, right? Like, when you're like, screw this, I'm joining the Army. I'm sick of being yelled at and sick of running, so I'm joining the Army. It says a lot about it. But there was just so much of that. And, people say, well, I can't believe people put – well, to a degree, you put up with it because that's all knew, because that's how high school coaches were. And, just kind of, that's how dads were in some, a lot. It just was a different time. But I'm glad from that regard, we've evolved a little bit in some of those areas. But, you also have to make sure that you're not going too far in the opposite direction where guys get soft. But I just thought this was hilarious that his grandpa got sick of being yelled at and running all the time. So he joined the Army. Because what do you do a lot of in the Army and basic training? You get yelled at and have to run a lot.
Yes, a lot of push-ups, and yes, a lot.
That's
funny too. Jared had a couple nice comments. I actually starred one earlier about he had a little note on Tabron Benny Powell, which was kind of interesting.
Okay,
which, we might have to get to a little bit later in the show.
Here, let me find that one since you're teasing it, Ryan. We're gonna have to bring that up now. So here we go. All right, here you go.
Jared just had put a note that Tabron Benny Powell is coached by a former head coach at Colerain in Cincinnati.
Colerain.
I played high school Colerain?
Colerain. Yeah.
Colerain. Sorry, my apologies. Yeah. Not an Ohio guy. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I played high school basketball with his older brother. I can attest to the character of the family and the rigors of his high school program. So nice note there.
And I appreciate that, Jared, because Jared obviously is from the Cincinnati area. For those of you who don't remember, Jared was a guy that I gave a 4-star grade to coming out of high school. But that's a thing that we talked about in the show the other day, Jared, is like, look, if you're going to take a chance on a kid, take a chance on a kid that the coach. Because like there's something too when you have a high school coach that you trust, because he'll tell you, hey, this kid's not your kind of guy. This is he can't play there, he doesn't have the attitude, whatever. But this is a guy that they've known for a long time. He vouches for this kid as a football player, and then of course in the other areas. But you're getting a kid that we talked about in the show is maybe he doesn't pan out and be a starter or whatever the case may be. But you're getting a kid that wants to be here and comes from a family that understands the value of coming to a place like Notre Dame. And there's value in that. There is. And so, we might say, well, I wish they'd got this kid, that kid. And that's still true. But there's a lot to like about Tabron as a young man. He earned the offer, right? Flat out. If he doesn't come to camp, he doesn't have an offer from Notre Dame. He wanted it. Sure. He came and he earned it. I respect that. When you talk about the type of background he comes from, you're like, you know what? You're going to get a worker. Is he going to pan out as a player? I don't know. But here's what you're not going to have to do. You're not going to have to baby him. You're not going to have to tell him he's pretty all the time just to make sure he doesn't get happy. He's not unhappy. You're going to get a kid that understands the opportunity he has, and he's going to come and work. Is it going to matter? May not. But you need – and Jared will tell you this, even in a place like Notre Dame. Jared was part of that 2015 team. He was part of some good football teams at Notre Dame. The fact of the matter is he's part of the 2012 team as well that played for championship. You need guys like that in your program. You flat out do. I think the reason that there's a lot more angst about Tabron Benny Powell is because of the struggles the position has had now for several seasons. If like Notre Dame was loaded at safety and you took this kid, you say, you know what? I get it, because you got Peyton Bowen last year. You got Xavier Nwang put a year before. Like, you're pretty good there. I need a tough, hard-nosed, gritty kid that's going to do everything that I ask him to do, run through a wall if I need to do it, go to class, value the education, comes from a great family. So if he's struggling, you know that you got mom and dad have your back at home. There's merit to that. And I think under different circumstances, Notre Dame fans might be a little bit more fired up about him because of the things that Jared's talking about. But because of the struggles of the recruiting, the position, you're going to have a natural question of, man, I just don't know if this is the move that they should have made. And I think that's where that comes from. But I do appreciate the fact that Jared gave that background, because that's one of the reasons that Notre Dame is willing to take a chance on this kid whose film and camp performance doesn't scream Notre Dame kid. But this stuff right here absolutely screams Notre Dame kid.
And that's a part of the process, is the intangible side of it, right? The character, the competitiveness, the leadership, and that stuff can't be seen on a huddle highlight film, guys. Like that can't be seen for the most part.
Ryan, there's one thing that you and I can guarantee to Notre Dame fans, as much as I can guarantee anything about the 24 class. If Tabron Benny Powell doesn't play at Notre Dame, it's not because he didn't work.
Exactly.
I mean, nothing's 100%, right? We never know how kids are going to be when they get to college, but based on everything I've ever heard about the kid, knowing the school, what Jared's telling you, if he doesn't pan out, he's just not good enough. But it's not going to be because he didn't work. It's not going to be because he wasn't bought in. It's not going to be because of any of those things. And as I said, you need guys like that on the football team. Not everybody can be Jalen Smith. Not everybody can be Sheldon Day. Some guys need to be Tony Springman, right? Some guys need to be Danny Spahn. Some guys need to be the guys that don't play but provide you, hey, man, this kid wasn't a good safety, but you know what? Like that year that we won the title, this kid made us work every day on scout team. I mean, we couldn't take a day off because if I did, he would lay me out. You know what I mean? Like he would battle with me. I had to be locked in every day because I knew this kid was going to bring it. Scout team was this kid's Super Bowl every single day. This is how he knew he was going to leave his mark at Notre Dame. You need kids like that, as opposed to the 5-star kid who's down there pouting because he's not getting his way and he's already in his head entered the transfer portal, right?
Yeah.
You need kids like that. And hopefully Tabron will be that kind of guy. And hopefully he's better than you and I think he is. I mean, that's always what I hope for.
I hope
but
so.
We just have to call it like we see it. And right now, the film just doesn't impress me right now.
We had a super chat from Tyler Evans. Tyler, thank you so much. When a coach is recruiting a player, how important is it to build a relationship with his parents? And do parents know when the coach is being honest and lying through their teeth about their son? I mean, it's vital, Tyler. I mean,
Yes.
Brian, you talked about the relationship between the recruit and the coaches, which is obviously incredibly important, but the parents is almost as important.
Yeah, and that's also something that I said too, Ryan, is you've got to know the people that are important to this young man from a decision-making process, because they're going to give you a background into, well, first of all, they can help you win the battle, but here's an important part of recruiting and team building. I need to know that when your kid comes here and things aren't going his way, when he calls home, because this is going to happen with almost every kid, because I don't care who you are, your first time living away from mom and dad, 9 times out of 10 is a struggle, no matter how much a kid was willing to leave. And so to me, you need to know that you've got a support system at home that are going to encourage him to battle through. You need to know that they've got your back and they need to know that you've got theirs, right? So if parents are trying to instill certain values in their son, then it's imperative that they learn that going to play for Marcus Freeman, those values that we believe in are going to also be emphasized at Notre Dame, right? That's important for parents. And then it's also important that as a football coach that, hey, these are the values that are important in my program. I need to know that when your kid's calling and complaining and upset and frustrated, that you are going to make sure that you're encouraging him to do this and do that and stay through it and all those type of things. And a lot of times when you get to know the parents, it's going to give you a sense of, okay, I met mom and dad. And like, so when you get to know Glenn James, you get a glimpse into why Braylon James is who he is, right? I mean, when you get to know Richard Tyree, you get a glimpse into why Chris Tyree is the way that he is. That's not all. When you meet Craig Nelson and his mom, like, okay, now I totally get Quentin, right? Because I know where he comes from. And so I think those things are incredibly. You meet Robert Hainsey's dad. You're like, yeah, okay, I know exactly who Robert Hainsey is now. I know exactly why he is the way that he is. And I think those things are incredibly valuable to know through a process. But as far as the last part, I mean, some people are good judges of that, and some people aren't. Simple.
Yes.
I mean, so it just depends on the parents. I mean, it really does. I know some parents are just, man, they just, because some parents get starstruck too, right? Like, oh my gosh, this is Nick Saban, or this is Dabo Sweeney, or this is Kirby Smart, or whatever, or this is the school that I grew up rooting for, and you fall for that stuff as well. Some do, some don't. I mean, it's no different than players. I mean, there are some 16-year-olds that I've met, and they're like, man, this kid is a lot savvier when it comes to seeing through the BS than most adults that I know. And then you meet some that aren't, and it's the same thing with parents. And so you want the parents that do see through the bull crap are the ones that tend to really like Notre Dame. Because Notre Dame isn't flash and all that other kind of stuff, right? Because those parents, Ryan, care a lot more about the substance, than the ones that did you see the cool car my son got to drive? Why should that matter to you as a parent? Like, why do you care about that? And those are the parents that are going to a lot of times send their kids to Notre Dame as opposed to other places.
We had another super chat from Full House Backfield.
I love the fact that he's got Jeff Burris in his photo too, because Jeff Burris was part of that Full House Backfield when he played. So I absolutely love that. Very well. I mean, if you're going to have your name be Full House Backfield, you better have a dude that was part of that backfield. And so, yes, very well done.
Yep. And we very much appreciate the super chat, obviously. And his question is, if Coach O'Leary were to move on next year, should one of the considered replacements be Mike Mickens coaching all defensive backs? I feel like this was done back in the day more often no than hire a linebacker coach.
Yes, it was definitely done back in the day a lot more often, Ryan. But that was also coach. Yeah, that was also back when coverages were a lot more structured as one, and safety play was not as. I was having lunch with a friend today, and a comment that I made to him was, I feel like safety has always been a position you needed a smarter guy, but it's even more so now because of just how much safeties are stressed and attacked. And I mean, a lot of offenses nowadays are meant to put safeties and outside linebackers in huge binds. And so you need those type of guys that can make those plays. And it can be a challenge, in my opinion, to have one guy coaching the entire secondary. It can be done, but it absolutely requires you to have a GA that is a really good football coach. I mean, you've got to have a GA that you can trust to go coach the safeties during drills. The other way you could do it too is if, like, for example, if Duke wanted to do that, let's say Duke wanted to hire a DB's coach that coached the entire secondary, and Mike Elko said, don't worry, I'll take the safeties during drills, like Nick Saban used to do with corners for Alabama for a long time. Mike Elko is one of the best safety coaches in college football. So in that instance, it's working, because then in meetings, the DB coach can have them all. The DB coach can kind of watch it all during practice. I've got a good GA that I can work with, or I've got a head coach that takes that position. So you can do it. You just it's more so about, do you have the staff around that guy to do it? I personally would like to see a safeties coach and a corners coach. I think there's value to that, but depending on who you could hire, let's say you have one position coach, you have no hires, right? And so O'Leary leaves, and you're like, man, but I really want to hire this one guy. Let's say Al Golden is still at Notre Dame. I really want to go out and hire a linebackers coach, because I think Al Golden's doing a great job running the defense, but he's not doing a great job coaching linebackers. And I can't keep recycling GAs every 2 years. I got a chance to go hire so-and-so who's a great linebackers coach, right? Or let's say Max Bulla is over the next year does a great job as the GA coach. Well, I only get him for another year or so. I want to keep him. So you promote him to linebackers coach in replacing O'Leary. And then you say, okay, Coach Mickens, you've got the whole secondary. You're the pass game coordinator and all that, but you better make sure you have a darn good safeties GA. Right. And that would be key. And if you do that, then I think you can make it work. And then, of course, Al Golden is now just the D coordinator. So there's things he can do to also be keeping an eye on the safeties at different times as well. So I think you can make it work. There's merit to that Full House Backfield, in my opinion. It's 100% dependent upon what you have around that coach that's coaching the whole secondary. And it's much more important now than it used to be, in my view.
Yeah. Especially because it's like a little bit of a crash course. I know they use Mike Mickens as the example. Like, how comfortable is Mike Mickens coaching safeties? Like, I mean, I'm sure he could do it, but not to the degree of coaching corners. I mean, that's a position that he knows. He's played. He's coached for a long time. So, I mean, I just think that it's very dependent on what's around you, to your point.
Good question.
We had another super chat from Bealsfield Financial Services Incorporated. Thank you so much. We have 7 games scheduled at home for 2024, which will be day games at home, night games at home, and a Shamrock game.
Let me pull up the 2024 Notre Dame football schedule here real quick, JP. And again, these are guesses on our part, but looking at history and tradition, Stanford will be a night game. That'll be a night game. My other guess for night game is going to be the November 9th game against Florida State. That'll be my other guess for a night game. Now, you could see Miami, but that depends on when they play Miami. We talked about this the other day, Ryan. But Miami's either going to have to get fit in between Louisville and Stanford. So the Louisville game is on Saturday, October 28th or September 28th. Then there's a bye. Then they have a game against Stanford on October 12th. Then they play Georgia Tech on the 19th. Then they play Navy on October 22nd. Then there's a bye. There's 2 other byes. So there's a bye between Navy and Florida State. So that would be like that Saturday, November 2nd. And then there's a bye between Virginia and USC at the end of the year. So they can fit Miami into one of those 2. I would prefer them to fit Miami in between one of those 2. I would prefer that they fit Miami in between USC, Virginia, USC. That's going to be could be a tough 4-game stretch, but I like the idea of having 5 games and then a bye. So having a bye between Louisville and Stanford. And then I would then go Stanford, Georgia Tech, Navy, then another bye week after Navy, and then play Florida State, Virginia, Miami, and USC. So there's going to be a tough 4-game stretch in there somewhere. I'd rather have 2 byes, one after Navy, and then one in week. Because you got to think week 5, you say, well, it's not halfway through the season. Actually, it's more than halfway through the season if you include you got a full month of fall camp. So the halfway through the season on the schedule is actually well over halfway of your football season in regard to when the football team shows up and when the season concludes. So I think like after week 5 is a great time to have a bye, in my opinion, Ryan. And since they play in August, they're going to have another 2-bye season next year. Notre Dame will, which I like. I think that's really smart. If you can have a week 0 game every year, I would do it if I was Notre Dame. Absolutely would do it every week. So that's my stance. Thoughts on that, Ryan? I think, and then the rest of the games will probably be day games. I don't know that they're going to have one, and late, I don't know that they're going to have one. I don't know what their stance is on that. That's a lot of that's going to be determined by the new athletic director. It's going to be determined by that because they had the Shamrock game in 21 against Wisconsin, right? And then 2020 they didn't have a Shamrock game because of all the COVID stuff, and I don't know that that Jack Swarbrick necessarily loved the idea of the Shamrock games all the time. Like they did not have a Shamrock game in 2020 or 2019, excuse me. So they had New Mexico, Virginia, Bowling Green, USC, Virginia Tech, Navy, and BC. So that year they didn't have a Shamrock game. What they did in 19 was they just had the alternate uniforms for the BC game. You remember they had the 88 throwback uniforms for that game in 2019, which I loved. Still probably my favorite alternate uniform. I've said I would be fine if they went to that uniform full time, just except for the black cleats. I didn't, that's a little too old school for me. But I mean, so I don't know that they'll necessarily have one, to be honest with you. And so that's kind of the thing. Somebody mentioned that they're playing Navy at MetLife. That's not part of the Shamrock. That's part of what they always play Navy. Whenever they have a road game against Navy, it's always played at a neutral field. I don't know. I can't, Ryan, I have to look it up. I don't know the last time Notre Dame played Navy in Annapolis, honestly. Let me go look this up because I can. Yeah, I mean, it's not in my lifetime. It hasn't happened. I'm pretty sure it hasn't happened in my lifetime. But let's see. It says 2014. I don't remember them playing in Annapolis in 2014. But yeah, I guess they did. So it says 2014. No, that's not correct. I was at that game. That wasn't at Annapolis. That was at yeah. Hold on a second. 2014. Yeah, I was at that game. That game was played in Washington, D.C., I'm pretty sure. So let me just look this up because I don't think that's correct. It says on Winsipedia that that game was played there. Yeah, the Navy game in 2014 was played at FedEx Field. I knew that was incorrect. So let's look at the last time before that it was played in Annapolis.
Was that FedEx that year?
Yes. So it says Wikipedia will say where the game was. It says 2014. It says it was played in Annapolis. And I know for a fact, I was like, no, I was at that game. Yeah. So I'm looking at this here back to 1927. They have not played that game in Annapolis. Yeah. A long time. Here's something wild. So, see, from Notre Dame played at home in 1937. And then games were either played in Baltimore or Cleveland from then until a home game at Notre Dame in 1953. They were played in either Baltimore or Cleveland. Isn't that wild? I see no games here listed in Annapolis, so I don't know that Notre Dame has ever played on Navy's home field. So that game is always played on a neutral field somewhere. Now, the Notre Dame home games tend to be played at Notre Dame, with the exceptions of like they're doing this year with the
Dublin.
the Dublin thing.
Dublin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a good question. I don't know.
I do like Annapolis. It's beautiful.
Huh?
I would love for there, right?
I would love for to have a game played, just one game there, and I would love for Notre Dame play Army at West Point. I would absolutely love that. Maybe just selfishly, I'd love to cover a game there, but I also think that would be a really cool. Like I would make it, and I know you got to be careful with this, Ryan. But I think sometimes there can be team building experiences, and I really believe that playing Army at Army, being at West Point, I would say, hey, look, obviously we're here to play a football team, but I want you all to understand what this football team represents. Now we're going to go out there on Saturday and we're going to try to whoop their butts, but understand who these kids are, right? And understand what it is. I think there's merit to that as far as developing young people. You know what I mean? So
me and really Kaylin used to go down to Annapolis just for like spend the day down in Annapolis. Annapolis is beautiful, man. Really like it down there.
Yeah. All right. That's good. Good question, JP. Very good question. Let's get back up here to the top here, Ryan.
We had a question from Nathan Melton. What's up, Melton? Where do you think the Adamalola twins would fall on this year's depth chart based on what you know about the current defensive line?
Well, I think that would all depend on the buy-in, Ryan. I mean, I think that would be key. Is I don't know that they would play as much this year as they did last year unless there was a change in buy-in. Is about the only way I can say it, right? So
yeah. I mean, it'd be nice if there was buy-in because I would love a 3-tech duo of Riley Mills and Jason Adamalola from a talent perspective. It'd be very nice.
Yeah,
very nice.
Yeah, and then you could also then use Riley as a swing player. So if you're playing a team like, let's say you get into a playoff game against Michigan, right, or Georgia, and they're more run oriented, you could put Riley at big end more in that game because it fits with what you're trying to defend. But then against USC and Ohio State and Clemson, you may put him inside and just have that dynamic 1-2 punch there. Yeah, that would be good. It would just depend on the buy-in. Talent-wise, there's no question they'd play. I would say Jason more so than Justin because I think Justin would be pushed a little bit more this year by Junior Tuihalamaka and Josh Burnham than he would have last year. Like I think if Jordan Patelho had a strong offseason, I think he's your starter. So I think you'd have seen Justin playing a lot more at the field end position in a rotation spot with Javonte and then being used in the nickel. But it all would just depend on their buy. Look, those kids have ability. There's no doubt. And but they would need to be bought in a little bit more. And I'll just kind of leave it at that for now, Ryan.
We had the next question from John A1. Says, following bowl wins, Notre Dame has had really good seasons following with exception of the 2012 season. The 2015, 2018, and 2020 teams all carried the momentum. Do you feel that will be true for the 2023 season?
I mean, look, you believe in – I'm a believer, Ryan, in momentum comes from confidence. Confidence comes from success, right? I mean, I think that when and I've said this before, I felt the vibe around the Notre Dame football team coming out of the 2014 season was so much different coming out of 2015, even though in 2014 that team had an absolute dumpster fire down the stretch. And the 2015 team was a play here, a play there away from being a playoff team. But the 2015 team lost their last 2 games. And the 2014 team ended their season with a big bowl win over an LSU team nobody thought they would beat. So I'm a big believer in that, Ryan. Now, do I think it's the end-all, be-all? No, I don't. I don't think that's the case. Do I think it plays an important role? Yeah, I do. I do think it helps. It helps with building your team's character. It plays a role, in my opinion, in just creating a sense of, hey, we are pretty good. This, depending on who you beat, obviously.
Sure.
Especially when you beat a good team. And I think Notre Dame had a big bowl win this year. South Carolina is not LSU, but it was a big bowl game. You know what I mean? A name bowl game. So I think that stuff matters, Ryan. At the end of the day, though, it's just a part of the process. It doesn't define it. If you don't have good leadership, I don't care who you beat the end of the season. But I do think that winning the season on a strong note, it's why I've always said I'd rather go to a New Year's Six game and win. If I already knew the outcome, if I don't know the outcome, would you rather go to a New Year's Six game against a team you know you can beat, or go to a bowl game or a playoff game and you're not sure? I'd take the playoff game. But if you give me the knowledge that you're going to go to the playoff game and lose, or you're going to go to the Rose Bowl or Orange Bowl or Fiesta Bowl and win, which one would you take? I'd take the win. If I already know the outcome, which one would I prefer? I would take the win. If you don't know the outcome, then I'm always going to want to play for a championship. But if you already give me the outcome, I'd rather end on a win. And so, yeah, I think that there's something to that. I do.
Well, I think momentum exists more for the teams that are built off of high school recruiting too, right? Because I think it would be completely different if Notre Dame wins a bowl game last year, but then they bring a mess of transfers that weren't a part of the team. It's like that's not what momentum
lost 20 some dudes, and exactly.
A lot of those guys that are going to be playing for Notre Dame this year and be legitimate producers played in that football game. They played in the football game against South Carolina. They experienced some level of success. Outside of Sam Hartman and the couple other transfers that are now a part of this team, the mainstays were a part of that success. So I think that for how Notre Dame is built, I think momentum is even more of a real thing. Like for some of these teams, you're going to lose a bunch, you're going to reload with the transfer portal, and there's not going to be a lot of continuity on a year-to-year basis. That doesn't mean that they can't win. That just means that I think momentum is less of a real thing for that team compared to how Notre Dame's built, if that makes sense.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Well, perfect example, Ryan, is Michigan State.
Yes.
I mean, Michigan State goes out and it was 2021, right? And has a great season. They go 10-2 in the regular season, lose to Ohio State late, but then they bounce back, beat Penn State at home. Then they go to a bowl game and beat Pitt. And they come out this year in 2022 and they stink. I mean, just stink. And so why? Because it was not the same. It was a much different football team than it was the year before because of all the transfers. And so, and there's just not the same buy-in when you're bringing guys in for, one-hit wonders. Now, those guys are important, and I'm all for bringing in a Sam Hartman, but it's like, to your point, Ryan, the core of your team still needs to be the guys that have been going through the battles and the wars from the minute they got there. I think the majority of your team, in my opinion, and guess who else believes in this? Kirby Smart, Ryan Day, Jim Harbaugh, Nick Saban. Let's be real. The teams that are playing for championships are still teams built around high school recruiting and development. Now, Alabama's brought in some transfers. Georgia's brought in some transfers. They probably fewer than everybody. Michigan has brought in important transfers. But Michigan is a lot like Notre Dame and Bama and Ohio State is. We're bringing in this transfer to fill a need there and to fill a need here, not to redo my entire roster. And I think that's important. And I think you've seen a little bit of a shift in the way that Nick Saban goes about the portal this offseason too, Ryan, because I think they brought in some mercenary types last year. I mean, why? Yeah. What was the reason for Jermaine Burton going to Alabama? What about playing time or winning a championship, right? It was for personal individual. I want more touches. I want this. Maybe there was some NIL stuff involved. I don't know the answer to that, but he wanted to go into an offense where he would get more of his, right? Well, guess what? He wasn't a great teammate last year, right? Shocker. And I think Nick Saban learned some lessons from that. Now, they went back to the portal again this year. It was a little bit different strategy this year, in my opinion, and it was a small number. I think that's the way to go. I think you nailed that, Ryan. Absolutely. Let's get down here. Here's one, Ryan.
The next question is from Gideon Rosa. Thank you, Gideon. If an awesome girl you like becomes a Notre Dame fan for you, is she a keeper?
Well, Gideon, I
guess my wife technically did do that. I guess. I mean, she was not a college football fan, and now she roots for Notre Dame.
Look,
I guess. So,
same here. Sure. Same with Angela. Yeah. I will say this, Gideon. There are so many more important things to a potential keeper. That trust and, honesty, having a good heart, someone who is outward focused or willing to be outward focused and someone who for me was important to find someone that had a similar faith background, similar view on certain issues in life. Like I cared more about what someone's belief in divorce was than I cared more about her love for Notre Dame football. Meaning, like, I wanted someone who said, hey, I'm doing this once. Now, look, there's always circumstances that lead to people having a divorce. It happens. I understand it. But I want to at least know going in that we're at least on the same page. So when adversity comes, when it will in a marriage, Ryan, you and I both know this, adversity comes in a marriage, and everyone who's been married knows, more than a month, knows that adversity comes, hardship comes, struggles come, that this person is I know that they're going to still be here, and we're going to battle through it. We're going to fight through it, but we're committed to coming out of it on the other side together. Right.
Yeah.
As long as you're in a situation where it's not like an abusive thing or, infidelity, stuff like that.
Or,
so I think those things
Michigan fan.
Well, that's what was going to be my joke. My wife would say, her advice for me, and this is what's funny about it, that if someone is an Ohio State or Michigan fan, that is a deal breaker. Her being a Notre Dame fan is not. And what's funny about that is my wife was completely apathetic to that notion. And what's funny is she now hates Michigan, Ohio State more than I do. Now, part of it's because having lived around here and lived in Ohio, she got to be around a lot of those fans, and that's where her contempt comes from. But in all seriousness, though, like what it says to me, Gideon, is that she loves you and wants to be a part of the things that are important to you. And I think that's that outward focus thing that I'm talking about. It's not so much that she's now a Notre Dame fan just because she loves football, but she's a Notre Dame fan because she cares about you, and she sees how much joy that being a Notre Dame football fan brings to you, and she wants to be part of that with you. I think that's a pretty cool thing. Yeah, and it might be to me, Ryan, it's like, sprinkles on ice cream, right? Like, or a little bit of syrup on top. The ice cream's still the deal, right? But it's nice to have that little extra something on the top. So it's
I would also say this, Brian. The riddle of the day for everyone out there is, if your significant other loves you but also loves the University of Michigan, does she really have good judgment?
That would be my question. I don't know that I can I don't know that deep down you're going to be there with me when push comes to shove. I got to question your values. I got to question your judgment. You know what I mean?
You got to question how good of a person you are if you are the Michigan to her eye.
What made this? What's it say about me that this person who likes Michigan also likes me? Like, I got to do some internal reviews there, Ryan. That maybe there's something wrong with me that this Michigan fan loves me. So I get
you're the Michigan of husbands. Like, oh man, I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness gracious. All right, here we go.
We had another question from D-Troll Hunter. What's up, Brian? Company. Just think about the Notre Dame offense. Big lineup of Colsey, Merriweather, Greathouse, and Eli Raritan. Man, it's like D-Troll. Like, honestly though, it's even more scary to think about that when you add in the fact that all those players aren't just big, right? Like, there's different attributes that they bring to the table. Like, Tobias and Dion can stretch the field vertically in different ways. Eli Raritan is a very athletic kid. Jaden Greathouse is incredibly nuanced and understands how to attack the defense. He isn't just big. Like, we've seen wide receivers in the past, or not even, I'm not even just talking about from Notre Dame perspective. I'm talking about like just from a general perspective, where you see a big wide receiver, you're like, that dude does nothing else other than just be big. That's all he does. He doesn't do anything else. Those receivers all have attributes of additionally to the size that makes them unique weapons, which I think is really cool. And then you add in the fact that Audric Estime as a 225 plus pound back in the backfield as well. Notre Dame's going to have a very big skill position group in 2023. Very big. And that doesn't include Jaden Thomas in the slot. And like,
yeah. I mean, Jaden Thomas is bigger than Jaden Greathouse. And look, the other thing too, Ryan, is like, I think you can insert any tight end, just about any tight end. I mean, you can insert Mitchell Evans is a big boy. I mean, Holden Stace is not exactly small. He's small compared to Eli Raritan and Mitchell Evans, but he's Cooper Flanagan. Those are big boys. So I think we'll see that lineup at times. Although I would say I kind of like the notion of, in times where I have Greathouse and Merriweather outside, Merriweather and Colsey outside, I'm kind of half tempted to be, that's an alignment I go to when it's the series off for Jaden Thomas, because the notion of having a Chris Tyree out there with the big trees outside and then the little fast guy on the inside. So, if you're going to overplay Tobias to the field and I hit Chris Tyree with a quick post or quick slant, and if he gets a step on your nickel guy and that safety's working out to help Tobias, band better. Yeah, that's one of those moments in a game, Ryan, where the band director quickly is like, oh, shoot, everybody get ready, get up, get ready, because Chris Tyree is about to house this thing. So, yeah, strike up the band, baby, get it ready to play. So, yeah, I kind of like that. I kind of like that idea. Yeah, I kind of like that idea. I wanted to say this.
Wide receiver. Can't
Imagine that, right? With versatile skill sets. Imagine that. I want to say this real quick, too. Jordan Schreiber asked about 1 to 10 today about certain recruits. Hey, Jordan, go to irishbreakdown.com. I literally have this story with all my confidence levels on the front page at irishbreakdown.com. So go read that and check that out, and you'll get your answers to all of those things.
We had a next question from Skylar ND, who said, pick one team from each conference that you expect is underrated going into the season and one team that is overrated. Oh, man.
That's a good one, Ryan. I kind of like this. So let's start off with the ACC and a team that I think is underrated going into the season. I think Duke is being very underrated going. I've seen some rankings have them in like the
for
50s.
A team that went 9-4 last year.
It's like they're completely ignoring that from last season. So I think I'm torn on my overrated one, Ryan, because part of me wants to say, just bear with me here. Part of me wants to say Florida State, because I'm seeing a lot of people picking them as a playoff team and a top 5 team, potential top 5 team. The reason I want to say I'm not super comfortable going there is because I think they're capable of that. I really like this Florida State, but my counteroffer is like, don't they kind of need to prove it a little bit first, though? Same with my overrated team in the Big 12 is easy. It's Texas. I mean, this is an 8-5 team that people are projecting as a top 10 borderline playoff team based on what? Recruiting rankings?
Yeah.
Like, they certainly didn't do anything on the field last year. I don't feel quite that way about Florida State, but I do think there's an element of they got to prove it a little bit. So, but I don't know if that's going to make me want to go completely with them, because I really do like the potential of that football team this year. So I'm going to go with Duke. But I also don't know that anyone else in the ACC is getting any love, Ryan. I mean, that's the thing, is like,
not really.
There's not any other teams getting a lot of hype this year besides Clemson and North Carolina. I mean, Clemson and
Florida State.
North Carolina's not even most people's preseason top 25s. So I don't know that there is an overrated team in the like, it's not like if a bunch of people are like hyping up Miami, oh, they're going to bounce back. I said, okay, that's a little overrated. They went 5-7 last year. They got a lot to prove, right?
Yeah.
But I don't see that happening, and no one's doing that right now. And so I don't know that I have an overrated team.
I don't think you can't really pick Clemson either, because Clemson's actually kind of not being talked about much for the first time in a few years. Now, it feels like, right? It's like
I will say this, like, the view on Clemson is strange. There's a lot of teams. Most people have them in the top 10, but at the bottom of the top 10, which is fair. I mean, they're down year. The last 2 years, they won 10 games and 11 games. Like that's the down. That's Clemson descending. There's a lot of people that would love to have Clemson to be where Clemson's descent is, right? But I think with the changes in the coaching, the Garrett Riley, the Cade Klubnik taking over, I think the excitement about Clemson bouncing back is legitimate, because again, this is still a team who won 11-3 last year. But now I'll say this: Phil Steele has them ranked second. That's overrated for Clemson.
Wow.
Like, that's too high. They should not be second. Now, he has them second in his. Now, have you ever read Phil Steele's preseason magazine?
I usually always get it. Yeah.
Okay. So I just got mine shipped the other day. And you know how he does those two? One's the power poll. So this is just a ranking of the teams who I think the best are, and with no context, just best teams. And then he has his other ranking that's based on context. So, like, I may like this team more, but their schedule's a gauntlet, and this team, who I don't think is as good, plays a cakewalk schedule. So I'm actually going to rank them higher because it's a predicted finish, which is fair. I mean, that's a good way of looking at it. If you're talking about the finish, then it's based on, hey, I actually think this team is better, but they kind of play these really 7 rough games where this team, and so he has Clemson second in that context. Which even then I still don't love that, but I mean that's too high. But they're a top 10 team to me. They'll be in my top 10 for sure. So so Big 10, Ryan. Let's go overrated, underrated.
Iowa's my underrated team. I feel like Iowa's going to take a nice step forward, and no one's really talking about them. And they finally have a competent quarterback. They always have a good defense, and they should be able to run the ball a little bit better last year than what they did, And so I think Iowa's an underrated team for me. Overrated? I've seen a lot of people hyping up that this is the year that Penn State makes a playoff run, so I'll go them overrated. I love their talents. I just can't buy into James Franklin taking them to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Just can't buy it. Great recruiter, really good man, not a great game day coach. That's just kind of where I am with that one.
Yeah, I somewhat question the great man thing. Very good recruiter for sure. I actually really like this Penn State team, so I'm not going to go there. I think a team that's very overrated coming in the season is Wisconsin. I think people are just kind of hyping up. I'm with you on the underrated one, right? I think Iowa's a team to look out for. Like, they won 8 games last year with one of the worst offenses I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, that was such a bad offense, and they still won 8 games. Like, that's absurd. And when Cade McNamara is a bigger improvement at quarterback than Sam Hartman is for you, than Sam Hartman is for Notre Dame, that tells you how bad their quarterback play was. But it's not just him. I really like Eric All. Now, they lost a really good tight end, but my whole thing with Eric All is this helps alleviate that loss because this is a good football player if he's healthy. I like the Caleb Brown pickup. So I think Iowa's a team to sleep on. And there's just this assumption that Wisconsin's going to make this smooth transition and be a top 15 to 20 team, transitioning from what they've been to this air raid offense, and I just don't see it. I'm not as much of a believer, Ryan, on just them being that kind of team. I don't know. You may disagree. I'm curious your thoughts. I think Wisconsin's going to struggle a little bit, and I'm very much not a believer in Tanner Mordecai. Just very much.
I think I've been deaf to expectations for Wisconsin. I haven't heard too many people hyping them up, so that's kind of my thing. Like,
they're like a consistent preseason top 25 team. I mean, consistently in the top 25. I mean, I've seen one ranking I saw had them in the like top 15 area. So like I'm looking at one from ESPN, their preseason poll. They had them in the top. They had them 20th, the preseason top 25. I've seen others have them as high as 15 or 16. I'm curious what Phil still has them. I got my other Lindy's over there. I could go look at that, but I'd have to get up and grab it. But I'm curious kind of where Phil Steele had him in his preseason poll. So he has Wisconsin 18th in his power poll, meaning not just he thinks they're the 18th best team in college football. And then in his actual preseason rankings thing, which is the other ranking that he does, he has them 13th.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, that's way too high for me. Like, way too high. So they're a team.
They're completely transitioning to a completely different offense, a completely different philosophy. Like, there's a lot of change. It's not even just a head coach or coaching staff. Like, that's a big change, man. I know
for a team that went 7-6, Ryan. That's the thing. A team that went 7-6.
I feel like this chat is very like pro Phil Longo, and I don't dislike Phil Longo, but like that's a big dramatic shift to make in 1 year, man. That's a very dramatic shift.
I am not. I think Phil Longo is a nice football coach. It's more so about the giant switch. You've got to have the personnel to run your offense, right? Why did his offenses in North Carolina flourish more so than at other places? Because look, we had a quarterback. He had Sam Howell. And Drake May. That's pretty good, right? I mean, that's pretty good. I don't see the personnel there, and I know a lot of people like Tanner Mordecai because they look at the numbers that he put up at SMU, and I'm like, go look at every game that kid's played against a Power 5 team. And he doesn't play well, and he wasn't very good at Oklahoma, in my opinion. So I'm not a real big Tanner Mordecai fan, to be completely honest with you. So that's the other part of it as well. And you're getting new players all over the place. Yep. And I mean, I maybe it's bias. I just remember watching Tanner Mordecai against Cincinnati in 2021 and being like, this guy ain't it. The last 2 years against Cincinnati, the best defense that he's faced in 2021, Tanner Mordecai went 15 of 26, Ryan. Not terrible, for 66 yards. This year against Cincinnati, he went 15 of 25, 105 yards. Like, you're going to put him in the Big Ten and think he's going to – I mean, you're going to put him against Iowa's offense and, I mean, Iowa's defense and Joe Rossi's defense and Ohio State and Michigan and you're expecting them to be a top 15 team with that talent? I don't see it, man. I just don't see it.
You're also throwing Braylon Allen, who's a 6'2", 240-pound back into that air raid offense.
Right.
It's just kind of a weird fit too, which is
don't see
because
it.
he's their best. Yeah. He's their best skill position player coming back, and it's just like, does that really fit that offense? I don't know.
Yeah,
man. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a very strange one. They're my overrated team in the Big Ten. Underrated, I'm with you on Iowa. Yeah, I'm sympathetic to your Penn State argument. I am, and I think their ranking is fair because I don't have anyone having them in the top 5. If somebody had them in the top 5, I'd say no. But with the combination of their schedule and their talent, I still think they're a 10-plus win team this year. I just don't think they're a playoff team. Although they're my dark horse. If James Franklin can just get out of his own, that's really what it comes down to, right? Get out of his own way. It's a ginormous if.
Yeah.
SEC,
I love the talent, man. I think I said this on this show, Brian. It's like if they ever move on from James Franklin over the next 2 years, the next coach is walking into a gold mine.
I'll say this, Ryan.
Like, so much.
That's going to be a highly coveted job if James Franklin left. Like if James Franklin left on his own accord, meaning like he hasn't run the program down, and you know what I mean. Like if let's just say James Franklin got hired by the New York Giants or the New York Jets or the Buffalo Bills or whatever. I don't know who. Pick a team. I don't know. Those teams all seem stable right now at head coach. But let's say let's say Ron Rivera gets displaced in Washington, which would probably be smart, and they hire James Franklin. Used to coach at Maryland. Name in the air, whatever. That's a job that there's gonna be a lot of coaches beating down the door to get that job, including some NFL guys, because they're going to look and say, this team is going to have a lot of talent. A lot of talent. That would be it'd be like when Butch Davis left Miami, not quite the same, but like for the Big Ten version of like, boy, this is a job that I want. You just hope that they don't give it to some current assistant who can't coach, like Mike Miami did with Larry Coker.
Yeah.
So that would be a very interesting.
They should do a 30 for 30 on what would have happened to Miami if they would have gone a different direction than Larry Coker and stay there. Maybe they still be the U today. Who knows?
Yep. There you go. It's a good question.
John A1 said it feels like the tight end room is steady for the 2023 season, even though in many ways it's like the linebacker room, full of sophomore potential. Do you have a similar feeling? I mean, John, for me, John, it's definitely built off of potential a little bit because, again, I think that Mitchell Evans is going to be a good football player, and I think that there's a lot of young talent in that room. But, you're returning what? Mitchell Evans had 3 catches for 39 yards last year, and it all came in one game, right? Like, that's your returning production, basically. Golden State's had 1 reception. So it's very unproven. I will say that it's a little bit different than linebacker because I think that the incumbent is a little bit more of a known commodity than let me rephrase. More consistent play than what the linebacker room was last year, right? Like it was super good in one spot and then not good at all in others, right? Like it was very up and down. I don't expect a lot of volatility with the tight end room. I expect the tight end room to be at least good. It's going to be a good room at least.
It's also the nature of the position, Ryan. Yeah, it's the nature of the position. It's again pass catchers. The part of the game that you would question with a young player at tight end is what? It's blocking, right? Like, is he going to block? Well, that's not a question for Mitchell Evans. He's a good block. He's a good blocker. He got better as he's gotten older and stronger. So I'm not worried about that part. It's okay. Can he make plays in the pass game? Well, I know he can. We've seen him get open. He just hasn't. The opportunity hasn't been there. But the talent is there. So I'm not worried about that. Experience doesn't matter as much to me at tight end as it does linebacker. It doesn't. Because linebacker, to me, there's just so much more mentally involved in it. So, I would say that there's even more potential discussion at tight end because there's a level of lack of provenness. I know that this is a controversial subject for some people that don't understand why. J.D. Bertrand is a pretty proven player. He is what he is. Jack Kaiser's a pretty proven player. It's really the will position that's just sort of tainted the entire position for how bad that was. Really for several years. It was bad in 2020. It was bad in 2022. So 2 of the last 3 years, Will has been a major problem. I mean, you're starting Will linebacker in 2020 had 14 tackles, something like that. It was absurd.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I think that room's a little bit more established where at least in the starting lineup where the tight end position is not, but I'm honestly not worried about it. And I think the other part of it too is it's kind of an apples to oranges conversation, Ryan, because the tight end room doesn't have to be relied upon if you're good enough other places. You can't hide linebackers. You can't hide linebackers. If you're not good linebacker, you're going to get exposed. You just are. All right. It's good question here, John. I like that one. All right, here we go.
Next question is from Jordan Schreiber, who says, Mailbag, can you talk more about the impression of Marcus Freeman after interviewing him? Thank you for the great Marcus Freeman articles that came from it.
Well, I have several more coming. Obviously, I had the injury updates for Jadarian Price and Eli Raridon 2 days ago, and yesterday I had the article about just kind of lessons Coach Freeman's learned in his 1 year, and today I have one about him talking about Jared Parker. I've got several more coming. Changes there, why he thinks the defense is going to be better. I talked a little bit about recruiting and several different. We talk a lot about like the pass game and the importance of RPOs, and so there's a lot we talked about, but. Ryan, simply put, if you were to say, can you describe Marcus Freeman in 1 or 2 words, I would say genuine, and I'm trying to think of like another way of saying, he knows what he wants. I guess I can't think of a way to say this in 1 word, right? But he knows what he wants to do. And I thought the genuine part is not just genuine about, oh, he's a good guy, but the genuineness part also comes from the notion of he's willing to say, hey, I didn't do this well, or I screwed up here, and I didn't coach well here, and I made a bad decision here. And I remember talking to him at one of the comments he made, and it hasn't been in the story yet, but he was talking about, his role this spring. And he was like, a year ago at this time, I didn't even know where to stand. I'm still trying to figure out where to stand, where to be during practice. And so like the last thing on my mind was dealing with this and dealing with that and dealing with whatever. And kind of talking to him, like the one article, and I put this on the message board. So you've actually read this a little bit. I think I put it on there. No, it was actually in the first article I wrote, but he talked about how, after the Stanford game, I think something clicked for Coach Freeman to where, hey, I've got to be this for this football team. And I think that was sort of his coming of age moment. But you can only come of age in that moment if you're willing to look in the mirror and say, this is on me. We're here because of me. And so I got to fix it. And in the past, the person in charge a lot of time would look outward when things didn't go well. It's him, it's his fault. It's that person's fault. It's this person. We didn't have a chef, so that's why, we missed a field goal here, and we didn't have a chef, so that's why we called this play here. And, we don't have certain facilities, so that's why I had Tommy Reese roll out and throw a bomb even though we're on field goal range and only down a point, as a true freshman. Like, it's all because of other people. And Coach Freeman's thing was, no, that we did that because of one reason, and it wasn't Drew Pine's fault. It wasn't the defense's fault. It wasn't Al Golden's fault. I didn't have this team ready to play. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And then he could point to things that they weren't doing, and that was the honesty, the openness. That's part of being genuine too, is to say, hey, look, I didn't have all the answers last year. I was willing to admit that, but I learned them as I went through it. And it's that expression, I kind of said to him, and I'm not sure if this is exactly how it goes, but this is how I like to say it, is you don't know what you don't know until you're in a situation and you're exposed for, you don't know it, but you learn from it. How do you learn from it? How do you come back from it? How do you bounce back from it? What do you learn? In his comments about he kind of made a joke. He's like, you can't panic. He goes, you can go into your office and panic a little bit. He goes, but when you're in front of the team, you can't panic. You have to, so he said, hey, look, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. But the things that they were doing were more about, we are why we're here. Me is why we're here. And now you've now got to go do this because this is what we need to do. And I thought that honesty about it was something that was very refreshing. And when he says it, it's just not like, he may be totally full of crap and just saying what he thinks we want to hear. If he is, he's really good at hiding the lie. because he comes across as very genuine, very honest. I kind of think, at least I like to think, that I'm pretty good at sniffing out BS. And when I'm being told, there's coaches I've gotten to know and they like to, hey, we're friends and stuff. But the reality is, like, dude, I'm not naive. I know why you talk to me. Because of what you think I can do for you, or you want me to maybe write a favorable article about you, or you want me to hammer you, or whatever the case may be. I know that. And then there's coaches that like, hey, this guy is someone who is a good person, and he doesn't care if I write a bad article about him or not, because he knows I'm just doing my job, and it's about football, not personality and all that kind of stuff. And with Coach Freeman, when you sit down and talk with him in those settings, you just say, this is a genuine dude. This is a guy that's willing to look in the mirror and say, hey, we got beat because I did not have this team ready. Not because we weren't good enough at quarterback, or not because we weren't good enough here. It's because me as a coach, and then we as a staff, we didn't do enough to get these kids ready to play. And he's got some comments, and I don't think I've had them in one of the articles yet. I have to go look at it, where let me see if I can actually find it here real quick, where I was really floored with his comments. And this is, I'll read it to y'all right here. So he and I are talking about sort of the defense and getting to know the defense better and stuff like that. And it's about, the experience of knowing each other. He goes, and this is a comment he said, I've always been the type of coach and leader that says what our players do is a reflection of what we teach. And so I challenge myself as a coach and our coaches to not just blame the players for what they do, because we have to really think that what they do is a reflection of what we taught. And there was so much of that lacking from the previous coach. And so to hear him say that, and it was part of a conversation where it wasn't even the initial question, it was kind of like a follow-up as we were like just really dialoguing. And I kind of pressed him on it in a way where I wanted to get like an immediate reaction from him. And that's exactly where he went, was if the players go out there and play bad, I don't go into my office at night and say, man, these kids suck. We got to go out and get better players. If you get beat by a team and they're just better than you, that's not what we're talking about. It was kind of coming from like the Stanford game. And they didn't lose to Stanford because they didn't have good enough players. The lack of execution and all those kind of things was on us. And that led to him talking about, like, part of that was, no, guys, we are going to do this. Stop trying to be cute. Stop trying to do this. This is who we are. This is what we're good at. This is what we're going to do. And it's our fault that we put those players in a position to not make those plays. And I liked that. It was very genuine. And I think the players see that. And I think it's part of the reason that the kids respect him and like him as much as they do. Because trust me, there's accountability in this program. It's not like he's the fun-loving and the players coach everybody thinks he is, and it's kumbaya. And if you screw up, it's like he just hugs you and tells you he still loves you and you're pretty and smacks you on the booty as you walk away. No, there's accountability, believe me. But the players also believe that there's a level of accountability at the top as well. And when you believe that the coach is going to look in the mirror first and then look at the staff next and then come to you, you're willing to take that criticism, because you're not the scapegoat, that he knows that, okay, we're going to do our part. Now I need you to do yours. And kids respond well to that, Ryan. There's no doubt about it. All right, here we go. Let's get down here to, we already saw that one. Sorry. Trying to get down here to some people questions from people we haven't had yet, because there's like 3 guys that just dominated the first 30 questions on here. So let's get down to some more. Here we go.
Brandon Plesner says, what players and Notre Dame targets have you heard the most buzz around from the evaluation camps starting right before Irish invasion till now? Which targets would you like to see Notre Dame lock down for 2025 and 2026?
Well, that's a much different, that's kind of a 2-part conversation, right? I mean, so the first part, Ryan, guys that we've heard, Matty Augustine, 2025 offensive lineman is someone. He got offered. I think the staff liked him a lot. They like his athleticism. Derek Meadows doesn't catch the ball real great, which is kind of important for a receiver, but he's big and fast and athletic and raw. Yeah, the kid from Bishop Gorman, they like him. The Blaine Bradford kid, the 26 kid is he from Cali, or where's he from? I forget where Blaine Bradford is from, Ryan.
Blaine Bradford is from.
I keep thinking Florida, but that's Ivan Taylor. Yeah, so I'm trying to see where Blaine is. He Baton Rouge? That's right. Duh, the Baton Rouge kid. He's a 26 defensive back.
Yeah.
Man, that kid blew them away at the camp. Like, they love that kid. So they're all over that guy too. Devin Williams is a guy that they had work out at camp recently, but they already liked him a lot. I mean,
They
he was
already
already a
offered
guy
him.
that they were very high on.
Yep.
Obviously, you know, some of these really the buzz is about guys that you've seen get offers. You know, the other 26 cornerback, Albert Hill.
Albert Hill, yeah.
I liked him, honestly. And when I found out he was a 26 kid, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, now I really like him. You know, and
yeah. Very
like
young looking.
who was the
Yeah.
was it Charles something? I forget his last name, but the corner that got offered after last week's camp. And I remember being impressed by this kid. Something I saw is obviously he was doing some good things, but there was one drill where he didn't close the rep off, and he's walking back up the sideline, Ryan. And Mike Mickens is standing in the middle of the field, you know, where DB coaches stand.
Charles Bell, right?
There you go, Charles Bell.
Yeah. CJ
And
Bell.
Coach Mickens yells to him, not yells at him, but yells to him. And the kid stops and looks right at Coach Mickens, like just eye contact. And the entire time Coach Mickens is coaching this kid up, I'm not watching Coach Mickens. I'm watching this kid, and he is just zeroed in. And then when Coach does it, he's like, you know, I got you, Coach. He goes back, and then he does exactly what he was taught that very next rep. And I'm like, that's a kid that I like, because that's a kid that's coachable. You know, he's not putting his head down because the ball was incomplete. And so he's not putting his head down because the coach is getting on him. He's not like, man, it's incomplete. Why are you getting on me? You know, he's taking the coaching. Got you. Okay. You know, and I think he's a guy that it stood out to me. So it didn't shock me when I saw he got offered, you know, after the camp. So those are some guys, Ryan, that I think right now that off the top of my head that there's some buzz about from the evaluation camps. And there'll be more kids that visited and did those things that get offered over time.
Yeah, and a lot of them already had. I mean, a few of them already had offers. To your point, like Devin Williams and Samuel Cohen was there yesterday. They already had an offer, and Justin Thurman was there. The one before who already had an offer. The running back out of Florida. So, yeah, some names that you should already be a little bit familiar with.
Rowan Byrne was a kid that I didn't get a chance to see a lot, but I've heard a lot of good things about, because the offensive linemen were on a completely different field, and I just didn't really get a chance to see much of them. But the guys I did see weren't impressive.
His film is pretty fun, man. It's pretty fun. Yep.
The other one, who would I like to see them lock down in 25? First of all, I'm not giving you any names for 26 because I refuse to make decisions like that based on freshman film.
What about the quarterback, man? What about the quarterback they offered? Come on,
no. 25, Ryan. Obviously, you'd like to see him lock down. I would love to see him lock down Deuce Knight at quarterback. That'd be huge. You know, that's going to be a battle. I mean, Tennessee, Ole Miss, it's going to be a tough battle. Alabama just got in the mix recently. I still think Alabama's going to end up getting George McIntyre. That's who I think they're going to get. And so I don't think that Alabama's going to necessarily be a play. And not that I think Alabama would even be the pick for Deuce anyway. I obviously Alabama offers you and you're a Southern kid, you're going to be involved. But I still think it's a Notre Dame, Tennessee, Ole Miss battle in that order. I mean, 1A, 1B with Tennessee, Notre Dame. I think it depends on the day you ask me who I feel better about there. He'd be one I'd like to see them to get into the class soon. Owen Strebig's a guy that I would love to see jump into class soon on the offensive line, Ryan.
Who just visited yesterday. So,
yeah, and did you see his tweet today? Yeah.
Yes.
So
he sent it to me. I got a little update coming on him. So
yeah, there you go. So he's a guy that I'd like to see them get in on early. I'd like to see them lock up Cree Thomas soon. He's a guy that I'd love to see them, get in the class early. Ryan, any guy? I'm going to look up the my offer list, but I mean, obviously, I'd love to get some of the linebackers. I mean, I'd love to get, Anthony Sacca. I mean, I'm just saying, like, realistic guys that I think could decide soon. I mean, who's the other one? The kid from Nebraska, Christian Jones. I mean, there's 5 or 6 linebackers, Ryan, that I would be thrilled about picking Notre Dame. I mean, it's a really loaded linebacker class. Really
I mean, for guys that could pop soon, I think he hit
Justin
most
Hill.
Of them. I mean, Owen Strebig's a big one, obviously, that as far as guys that maybe could pop somewhat soon. You mentioned Cree Thomas, like you feel good about where Notre Dame is with their. Feel good about where they are with a couple of the defensive ends, but timeline I think is still a little bit like Christopher Burgess obviously is a player that they like a lot, but I just don't think Christopher Burgess is ready to make a decision anytime soon.
And he's blowing up right now. I mean, he's gotten Ohio State recently, Michigan recently, Alabama. Didn't Alabama offer him recently as well, I believe? So, yeah, he's blowing up. I don't see that one happening anytime soon. I know. And, obviously they already got Nate Roberts, which is big.
Yep. Yes.
Receiver's an interesting one, Ryan, because I'd love for them to get Taylor in the class soon. I just don't think that's going to happen, but I would love that. I mean, he is my numero uno guy, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it at the position. But, yeah, if they could get Matty Augustine, Owen Strebig, and Rowan Byrne in the class soon. I mean,
It's pretty
it's the
good, man.
beginnings of a heck of an offensive line class, right? Because Matty
And you
Augustine's
go all in
probably
on
not.
David Sanders.
Yeah, him and Avery Gack, you could go all in on those two guys, because I think it could end up being a 4 to 5 man class, depending on how the roster shakes out. But, I'd be thrilled with that. Defensive line, I still think they're still settling on who they actually like the most in that class. So that one's a little bit of a question mark. Defensive tackle, they already have a kid. Don't you have an update coming out on Elijah Barnes, a linebacker, soon?
Yes, I do.
But yeah,
yep.
so
He's
you've got
also
that.
blowing up, man.
Yeah,
I remember when they offered him, he was only like a 3-star. Now he's a consensus pretty much top 100 player, and he's got Alabama and Georgia and all the Texas schools, and he's blown up.
Madden Ferrimo, Justin Hill. It's a really low. I mean, Christopher Jones, Josiah Kia. I've never seen film of, but he's related to Kahanu Kia, Noah McKell, Landon McComber, Gavin Nix. I mean, Anthony Saka, Nathaniel Owusu Boateng, Carlton Smith has visited campus. I mean, it is a loaded class at linebacker. Ryan, what do you think of like Trey Harrison visited? He's a kid I like. If I don't know that necessarily where I feel about pushing for him now. Kid that I was going to ask you about that I haven't seen a whole lot of, and I'm actually going to pull his film up right now as you're talking. What are your thoughts on Remington Moss? Because he's now made a couple visits to campus, correct? Or am I?
He has.
I think he's made a couple
twice.
visits.
He's been to campus twice.
Because I thought he went to a game this year, right? And then he was on campus this past week, I believe, as well. Yep. So what are your thoughts on him as a player? Because he seems to like reading your article that we published this morning. Did we publish that? Did I publish that this morning? He seems to like Notre Dame a lot, Ryan. What are your thoughts on him as a player?
I think he's a really good-looking athlete. 6'1", 175 pounds. Some people have him listed 6'2". I think he's more in the 6'1" range. He had crazy ball production last year. He had like 5 interceptions, 1 for a touchdown, and 16 pass breakups or something like that. So, I mean, he's got a little bit of range on the back end. I think the safety class is pretty nice, man, for what I've seen. I mean, talking about a couple of those guys that we've talked about a ton, obviously, at this point.
And he actually plays corner in high school, which is
he plays all over the place a little bit. I've seen him play some nickel. He plays corner, he obviously projects the safety. So he's got ball skills, man. And anytime you got ball skills and some movement skills, I'm gonna be pretty high on you. So
looking at the film now, Ryan, I agree with you on the 6'1" thing, but he's got some long flipping arms, man.
Yes, he does.
He's got some really long arms. Definitely not a corner, in my opinion.
Yeah. They got some length at safety, man. Because I mean, for every Trey Harrison and Trey McNutt, who are like a little bit of smaller guys, they have Remington Moss. They have the Tagayola, who is a massive kid out of Nevada. Yeah. They have Jaden Blair out of North Carolina, who's 6'4". I mean, they have a lot of length at that position, right?
And obviously, we would love for them to lock down Dorian Brew and Dallas Golden, but those aren't like realistic. Sure. I'm just trying to be like realistic with guys that I think you could get early, and honestly, I'd like to if they're going to take Jerome Bettis Jr., I'd like to get it over with sooner. That way, you can use him as kind of a recruiter in the class as well. So if you're going to make that move and get him in the class. You know what I mean? So, that's something. He's a guy whose junior film is going to be really important to watch, because if you watch his sophomore film, it does not knock your socks off. But then if you watch his camp film from the summer, it's like, okay, that's not the dude that I saw in sophomore film. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's more athletic, he's more – I mean, he at one of those rivals camps, he's making like one-handed catches with dudes draped all over him. He's like running by guys. Like, okay, that's not what I saw in film. I'm really curious to see his junior film, to be honest with you. But those are some of the guys, Brandon. Hopefully we'll be able to answer some of those for you, and you like them. You like some of the answers, hopefully. We'll see.
Irish Gordy Knott says, do you think you would be as high on Aeneas Williams if you hadn't seen Kyron succeed with a similar playing style?
I would.
Digest for a second.
Yeah, I would still be high on him, because I don't evaluate Aeneas because I think he's the next Kyron. And I don't think that Aeneas – because here's, for me, it would be, okay, you weren't high on Kyron. I think this is where the question's coming from. I wasn't high on Kyron coming out of high school, but I'm higher on Aeneas now. Is Kyron's success a reason for that? And I'd say no, a couple reasons why. I think Aeneas is bigger than Kyron. I think Aeneas is more explosive athletically than Kyron. I think those two things are true. I think it's the athleticism, like where Aeneas Williams Kyron Williams was a heck of a high school football player. I mean, he's a kid who had over if I remember correctly, he had over 2,000 yards rushing and 2,000 yards receiving coming to high school. Very similar to Aeneas, right? But with Kyron, the issue wasn't that he wasn't a good football player. It's just that he lacked the size and the explosiveness athletically for that size. Like he was always a quick, shifty kid, but he wasn't a very explosive kid. And he wasn't at Notre Dame either. But it more comes down to with Aeneas, I see Aeneas being a more explosive athlete. And I think he's also a little taller than Kyron was coming out. He's probably about an inch taller than Kyron was coming to high school too. So to me, Ryan, Kyron's success showed me that you can have that role, but my fondness for Aeneas is more about what the athleticism, the vision, the feel, the size that he has in high school. That to me, that would be the reasons why I like him. I try not to project onto this kid something that I saw in another kid, even if it's like a younger brother. Like I didn't think Julian Aguara was going to be good because Romeo was. I thought Julian was going to be good, could be good because of what Julian showed on film. And so that's that would be my stance. Have you kind of digested? Do you kind of get where he's coming from, Ryan, a little bit now? Do you have a thought on that?
I mean, to a degree. I think I see it pretty similarly, though, in the sense that Aeneas Williams is bigger right now than Kyron Williams was when Kyron Williams was a junior in college, and Aeneas Williams is about to be a senior in high school. So I just think there's a little bit of a different, and I understand why we couple these guys together because they're both all-purpose backs and they both come from the state of Missouri. Like I understand why the comp is out there. I think they're a little bit differently of functional runners, right? And so I do think that Aeneas is more talented though than Kyron, but will Aeneas have the determination and the intangibles that Kyron Williams had? I don't know. I mean, that was Kyron Williams has been one of the best leaders that Notre Dame has had in the last couple of years, man.
Workers.
That kid loved football, man, and he loved Notre Dame, and he put everything he had onto that field. You need more Kyron Williams on your team, just from a personal perspective. Like that kid was about as competitive as a player as I've seen at Notre Dame. Like that kid wanted to win with everything. So I loved it. I loved Kyron, man. If Aeneas ends up being as productive as Kyron, it'll be different. It'll look different, but it will be very welcomed because Kyron was a very good football player for Notre Dame.
Yep. Here's an interesting one, Ryan, from John A1.
John says, which player on both offense and defense is the most unique? Very rare talent that's difficult for other teams to mimic in preparation. John, I think Brian hit on one a little bit earlier, but Chris Tyree is a pretty unique player now that he's playing slot and, a little bit of that gadget type of player, right? So he's incredibly unique. And I also think, I don't know if I would call him the most unique on defense, but I think Riley Mills is a very unique player. Like you don't have 296-pound guys that can split between strong side defensive end and 3-tech very often. Like it's pretty rare. It's not like a usual type of thing. So I think those are a couple of guys that immediately pop as far as like uniqueness of their games.
Defensively, for me, it's Howard Cross. You can list him at 275 all you want, 280 all you want. He's not that. The fact that he can play nose guard at a high level is unique. He's barely 6 feet tall. He's 265, 270 pounds at the most. He's a pretty good football player in an era where people focus on size. He's a pretty unique guy. I think Xavier Watts is another one because I think he's a guy that can play multiple spots. I think Cam Hart might be the most unique DB they have because I think he can literally play 4 of the 5 secondary positions and play them at a relatively high level. Offensively, Chris Tyree is a good one. Obviously, I think another one too, Ryan, that's a unique player is Audric Estime because he can do the things that you expect a player with his size to do. But I think a very underrated aspect of, I was having this conversation actually with a friend in the coaching world where he was like, I'm not really impressed by that guy. And I was like, I think you would be if you watched him more. I think that the agility, and I shouldn't say agility, the balance and the foot quickness that he has for such a big back is a bit unique. Reminds me a lot of Ron Dane in that Ron Dane was the weirdest college football player I've probably ever seen because he was not as talented as you would. He didn't look like a guy that rushed for 2,000 yards every year, basically. I mean, you just watch him run and you're just like, I don't get what's so good about this guy. But then when you really see him, like, boy, this big old boy had some great feet and vision and feel where he's not a sexy running back where you're just like, wow, this guy's really good. You know, like you watch Leonard Fournette carry the ball 5 times, you're like, wow, what a freak. You know what I mean? Like this guy's amazing. Yeah. With Ron Dayne, it was just like you'd watch. I mean, Ryan, I don't know. He might be a little too. You might be a little. I don't know if you watch much of him in the college. You might be a little too young for that because he was like one of the Heisman. You were what, like 4? But like you watch him play, and you're just like, well, I don't get what the hype was about. And then you look at the stat sheet, and you're like, oh, he had 195 yards. It just was like because he was just kind of one. And you're like, how is that guy running away from people? Like he looks slow, right? Like. But he just could play, and I think those lack of skills is why he just couldn't make it in the NFL. But he had really nice feet and vision for such a big guy, and a unique running style for a big guy. And Audric reminds me a little bit of that, to be honest with you.
So you know Ron Dayne's a Jersey guy, and he actually holds the state discus record. There's a kind of a legend of Ron Dayne throwing discus in New Jersey, where he was at one facility. He threw the discus over a fence, like 200 something feet, and they had to literally take down the fence to measure this discus throw. So they stopped this entire, like, I think it was like one of the bigger meets, like one of the, you know, like the classics or whatever. And they're like, nope, we got to stop this thing. We got to tape measure this because this is a state record holder type of thing. So yeah, man, it's a New Jersey legend, man. So of course I know Ron Dayne.
Well, I know you know who he is, but I didn't know that you watched him play, you know, in college. Yeah. That's my point. Like I know that Tim Brown was a great Notre Dame player, but I couldn't tell you that I watched much of him at Notre Dame. I knew more as an NFL player. So good question, John. Good question. Okay, let's get down to one here. Let's get down to here's an interesting one.
Jordan Schreiber says, who do you think was better college running back, Bo Jackson or Herschel Walker?
I mean, it's Herschel Walker, and it's not really close. And I know Bo was a great player, and Bo won a Heisman, and Bo was Bo was tremendous, but Bo was not, partly because Bo played multiple sports. I mean, I think Bo ran track at Auburn as well. He played baseball at Auburn. But when you look at Bo's numbers, he had 829 yards as a freshman. 1,213 yards as a sophomore. He had 475 yards as a junior, and then 1,786 yards and 17 touchdowns as a senior. Had 272 receiving yards. And then you look at Herschel Walker, and he had 1,600 yards and 15 touchdowns as a freshman. He had 1,891 yards and 18 touchdowns as a sophomore, and then 1,752 yards and 16 touchdowns as a junior, and he was part of a national championship team. I mean, so he elevated, and he was the offense. So Bo was the more entertaining player, maybe, but Herschel was the better college running back. There's no question about it. I mean, and Bo never rushed for 1,000. This is the crazy about the mythology that surrounds Bo Jackson. Because of him playing 2 sports and because of the hip injury, we never got to see the best of Bo Jackson in the NFL.
No. And
a lot of people, we talked about this recently, Ryan, but I didn't know this until I looked it up one time because I wanted to see what Bo's stats were. Because I grew up playing Tecmo Bowl, and like if you ran that toss sweep to Bo Jackson, it was a touchdown. Bo Jackson never rushed for 1,000 yards.
Was like 900 something yards, right? But it was
never rushed for 1,000 yards.
Like that.
Yeah, never rushed for 1,000 yards. Now, to your point, Ryan, that 950 yards came in 11 games. Right. I mean, so and the dude averaged 5.5 yards per carry. So in his 3 years, he averaged 5.4 yards per carry in the NFL. That's a really good average in the NFL. And he had a 6.8, 5.5, and 5.6. But you know, if you take the year that he ran for 950 in 11 games, and you average that over a 16 game season, that's over 1,300 yards. I mean, he was very good. But a lot of that is mythology of the highlights were incredible, but it's not even close. When you talk about who the better back was, it was Herschel Walker. I mean, he was unbelievable. Now, it doesn't take away from Bo's greatness. I mean, 2,000-yard seasons, but Herschel was a dominant player the minute he stepped foot on campus and never stopped being such.
I do wish that we could know exactly how good Bo could have been in just one sport, man, because either one. To your point.
Either one.
The craziest play that he's ever made that was from that 30 for 30 is when he was playing outfield and he threw Harold Reynolds out from the wall with
Who could
hop.
run? Right.
Yeah,
right.
Dude,
Harold,
insane.
it's
What?
not like he threw out Cecil Fielder, right, Ryan? I mean, it's not, you know what I mean? He threw out Harold Reynolds who could scoot. He could scoot.
Dude,
There's no doubt.
that throw was insane. And he didn't even one hop on the ground, like literally from the wall to home plate. Insane, man. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, great athlete, but not necessarily an all-time great. Like, you know, obviously he won a Heisman, so he had a great season, but you know, Herschel had Heisman caliber seasons every year that he played.
Right.
You know, that the fact that what years did Herschel play? In 1980, I'm actually going to look up and see who the Heisman Trophy winners were those years, because I'm curious where Herschel finished in those seasons. So in 1980, George Rogers won it. Okay, he had a pretty good year. Hugh Green was second. 1981, Marcus Allen won it, rushed for 2,400. Okay, yeah, now that's insane. So here, talk about some all-time names in the top 10 of the Heisman Trophy voting. In 1981, Ryan, get this. Marcus Allen finished first in a landslide because he rushed for 2,427 yards and 2 touchdowns. Herschel finished second. Jim McMahon finished third. Dan Marino finished fourth. Darren Nelson, you remember him from Stanford, finished sixth. Anthony Carter finished seventh from Michigan, great wide receiver in college and the NFL. You had and then here's an interesting name, Art Schlichter from Ohio State, who's more known for his gambling issues than he is his football. But the year that Dan Marino, shows how different the game is. The year that Dan Marino, I'm going to make 2 points. It shows, number one, how the game has changed, but also how Lavelle Edwards was ahead of his time in a lot of ways. In 1981, Dan Marino finished fourth in Heisman Trophy voting, had a great year, 37 touchdowns, 2,800 yards, 23 picks. Yeah. And he finished fourth in the Heisman Trophy voting. So it just kind of tells you a little bit something how the game has changed. He also threw 23 picks as a senior. But Jim McMahon that year had 3,500 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. So that was because he was running, you know, that Lavelle Edwards offense. Yeah. So Jim McMahon is a quarterback. He's probably the biggest what-if quarterback for me. What if he wasn't a little off? But more so, what if he didn't have all the injuries he had with the Bears? How would he be viewed as an all-time quarterback? Because Jim McMahon was a very talented quarterback and a very productive quarterback in college and the pros, but he just had all the injuries, was really just and the health problems, and really just kept him from ever reaching his full potential. And still won a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Yep. So he's a big what-if guy for me. And then, of course, Ryan Herschel, his last year, won the Heisman Trophy voting. So I'm curious who you know who the runner-up was for him? Here's another example. Good Lord. 1982. Herschel won the Heisman. The number 2 guy is John Elway. Nope. No, Andre Ware was later. It was 89. But John Elway was number 2. Eric Dickerson was number 3. Anthony Carter was number 4. Dave Remington, who has a trophy named after him, was number 5. Dan Marino finished 9th, and then Kurt Warner and Mike Rozier tied for 10th. Now, some of you may say, Kurt Warner, not that Kurt Warner. It's the one that played running back at Penn State, played for the Seahawks, and that Kurt Warner.
Spell with a C, not a K.
Yeah. Yes, there you go. There you go. So that, man, there's some legends back in the Heisman Trophy voting back in the day, boy. Goodness gracious. Man, that was interesting. 1983, Mike Rozier won it. Steve Young was second. So, yeah, Steve Young passed for 3,900 yards that season. Interesting. Oh, your boy Boomer Esiason was 10th in Heisman voting in 1983, right? So there you go.
Maryland, great.
There you go. Esiason. So good question there. Let's get down to some more here. Okay, this is a good one.
D-Troll Hunter, top 5 non-Notre Dame games you are looking forward to seeing this season. Oh, man, I need to do a lot more research for this.
So I'll try to think. I mean, obviously there's the Notre Dame, the Michigan-Ohio State game is always a game I look forward to, but I also think this year there's a lot of intrigue. So that's one that I'm very much looking forward to, Ryan. Michigan-Ohio State, I'm very much looking forward to LSU-Florida State game. That is definitely one I'm looking forward to seeing. I think that's going to be a very interesting game. trying to have a mix of in-conference and out-of-conference games, as you kind of look at this. So LSU, Florida State, Florida, Utah, they play again this year, don't they? That'll be an interesting one. Let me pull up the NCAA schedule here this year. But Alabama, Texas is one. I think that's one of the more intriguing out-of-conference games. What is that? Because here's the question, right? Is Alabama truly descending, and is Texas truly ascending? That game's going to go a long way towards telling us that. Long way towards telling us that, in my opinion. I don't know what your thoughts are on that one. That one there, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, I have such a strange opinion on Texas this year, Brian. I don't know what to expect from that man. I really don't. I mean, because I think that they should. I don't know. On paper, I think that they should be the leader to win the Big 12, just because they have the most returning production, right? And there's teams that I think are going to kind of take a step back, like TCU, but I don't know, man. I just have a hard time completely putting my faith in them a little bit.
Yeah.
Big 12 conference is going to be kind of weird this year because
I just realized too,
TCU's
Brian,
going to take
we'll
a step back.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, keep going.
Oh no, I was just going to say TCU's going to take a step back, in my opinion. Agreed. Is Baylor going to take a nice step forward after a little bit of a down year? Is Kansas State going to be able to be a team again? I mean, there's just a bunch of
Is Oklahoma going to improve in year two under Brent Venables? I just realized too, Ryan. So finishing the games, obviously, that we were talking about, Texas, Bama. I'm very much looking forward. Here's a conference game. I cannot wait for the Clemson Florida State game. That game has not mattered for a long time, and it's sort of that Clemson's the big dog in that conference. Florida State's trying to get back on top. That game's going to tell us a lot. And can Florida State win it? Can they can they finally knock Clemson off that perch, or is Clemson still going to say, hey, young fella, you're not there quite yet? You know what I mean? So that's another one that I'm looking forward to, Ryan. Trying to think of there's really no Pac-12 games that I'm like, oh wow, I can't wait to see that one. If I was, it'd probably be Washington, Oregon. I think that's going to be an entertaining game, but probably not one that I'm necessarily looking forward to. None of those Michigan juggernaut non-conference games really entice me this year, Ryan. Sorry, I don't have any of those.
They're playing UConn again.
Yeah. I mean, really, really tough schedule there. Those are the main ones. I have to go through to look the schedule. I just realized, Ryan, we never finished the overrated, underrated. We stopped that for some reason. We got distracted in the Big 10. So Big 12, I think for me, Texas is overrated. I think Texas is getting way too much preseason love for a team that went 8-5. I get why, but they have a lot to prove to me before I'm ready to start having them as a consensus top 10 team. I don't know that I was underrated. That's an interesting
I think Oklahoma's
one.
I think Oklahoma's a bit overrated. I've seen them decently high in a couple polls. I'm just like, guys, they went 6 and 7 last year.
And they weren't an impressive 6 and 7, Ryan. Right? Yeah. I mean, they weren't a 6 and 7 team. You're like, boy, that team's going to break out. You know who I'd say is underrated in the Big 12? I'm going to go here, Ryan, as I'm kind of thinking through all the different teams in the Big 12. Texas Tech. I really like what Joey McGuire's doing there. I could see them if they can stay healthy. They got to keep their quarterbacks healthy this year. I think they could surprise some people. So I'm going to go with Texas Tech there. SEC.
I feel like Kansas State is underrated every year because I feel like people don't even talk about the fact that they won the Big 12 last year. But
I know, right?
Like, okay,
seriously,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, seriously. Sure. Maybe it's because I respect them so much that I don't view it that way. Yeah. But I don't see them getting a a lot of love, and they have a lot.
I don't see anybody talking about Kansas State.
Yeah, I think maybe because I don't know, maybe because their running back is gone. Yeah, I don't know, but they're Chris Kleiman's doing a nice job there. Let's go to the SEC, Ryan. Who is your overrated SEC team heading into the 2023 season?
I think LSU is a little bit overrated. I mean, I see people just saying that they're a foregone conclusion to unseat Alabama for the second straight year in that side of the bracket. And I'm just like, guys, let's slow down a little bit, just a little bit. I know LSU has talent coming back. I know they're a good team, but there was also some mixed results last year. Let's not act like it was all great. I mean, we still saw the Arkansas outing. We still saw the Florida State game. We still saw the Tennessee game. It wasn't all great.
Georgia.
It wasn't all great.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like you're right though, Ryan. They ignore the just bad games that they played
Because they
and
beat
just
Alabama.
focus on they beat
Okay.
Bama. They beat Bama.
Yeah.
They beat Bama. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
so what? They beat Bama. I'm trying to see how Phil Steele has some of these teams ranked. I think Ole Miss to me is getting a little bit overrated. I was not in love with that Ole Miss team last year, and I don't know that I'm in love with the Ole Miss team coming into this year. We'll see. Have to figure out a quarterback, but I'm trying to. He in his PowerPoint has Auburn 25th. That's a lot of love for
How high?
Phil Steele. 25th, and he has
Has
Florida
Auburn there?
28th. Yeah, 25th, and then Florida 28th. I think Florida's going to have a lot more problems than that. They couldn't win a bunch of games with Anthony Richardson. You're telling me they're going to go win a bunch of games with Graham Mertz?
I think
So
Auburn's
yeah,
going to be really bad this year.
Yeah,
They're going to be a very bad team.
Yeah, I know they've
Thorne.
landed some guys in the portal and all that, but no, they had a lot of problems, Ryan.
Their quarterback position is so bad that they had to go get Peyton Thorne. So
yes, that's a really good point.
They're like, wow, TJ Finley and Robbie Ashford are so not good. We have to go get Peyton Thorne. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah, that's not good. That's I'm going to agree with you there, Ryan. That's not good. I'm looking at some of these preseason polls for this season and seeing kind of where they have some teams ranked. See Kentucky 27th. That'll be I don't know what to make of Kentucky, but I actually think that they might be a little bit better this year. I thought, and you knew partly why. Yeah, I'm not in love with that. Who's this? USA Today. Athlon has Texas A&M 20th. That's way over. I mean, anyone that's got Texas A&M in their top 25 of anything right now is just ridiculous to have that.
At least it's not a top 10 team like every year, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So hard pass on that one. Who is an underrated team in the SEC for you, Ryan?
SEC, Mississippi State is a quiet team that won 9-4 last year, and I feel like no one talks about that. Like, they're a pretty good team, like not bad. I feel like no one talks about them. Kentucky, I actually think is actually going to be much better than last year.
Yeah,
actually, like I wouldn't be surprised if they win like 9-ish games this year after going 7-6. Like I think because I think Devin Leary is a better college quarterback than what Will Levis is, and I think that it's going to be a little bit more consistent as far as the approach with Liam Cohen coming back. So I wouldn't be shocked if Kentucky's a better football team this year.
Yep, underrated. It's hard to ever find an underrated team in the SEC because to your point, like it's just they always get overhyped. So Kentucky's probably the best bet for me. I just don't think it's hard to find an underrated SEC team. It's a difficult one. And then let's Big 12 we already did. Let's finish up, Ryan, in the Pac-12. Who is I feel like I want to say like Washington, but then they're getting top 10 love. Oregon's top
underrated
15, USC 10. But underrated to me is like how are we not talking about the back-to-back Pac-12 champs when people talk about like we'll have these who's it going to be this year? Is it going to be USC, Oregon, or Washington? I'm like, finish that sentence. Or Utah, the team that's won it the last 2 years. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's an easy one for me. They're very underrated. Yeah. I was going to say Oregon State, but most people have Oregon State in the top 25, preseason top 25. So I'm good with that.
A team I keep talking about is Washington State. I think Washington State's going to be a pretty good team this year, man. Like they went 7-6 last year, but I think when you really like dissect what they did in 2022, it was a lot more impressive than what the record would just indicate. I mean, I'm pulling it up real quick, but I remember they took Oregon to the wire. It was like
44,
3 or 4 point game.
Yeah. 4-point loss to Utah. And Ryan, they lost by 16 to USC. But if you actually watch that game, USC pulled away late. Washington State battled with them. That was one of the best defensive performances anybody had against USC last year. And I think to your, I know where part of what you're saying is coming from. Part of what you're saying, and they also beat Wisconsin on the road last year.
Yes.
Your premise, and I think you've said this before, and I agree with it, is the fact that they got a transfer kid from the FCS level now that that had multiple years of eligibility is important, because I think it's hard. I don't care how talented you are, Ryan. There's the list of guys that have gone from FCS to Power 5 or even Group of 5 to Power 5. They don't make the jump that people think they're going to make because it's an adjustment. Well, Cameron Ward went through that adjustment last year. And now he's going to have more experience doing that. And I think you've brought this up before, so I'm not surprised you went with Washington State. And I agree with you. I think having Cameron Ward in year 2, you had a lot of controversy that was still looming over the program with the way that Nick Rolovich was fired and the lawsuits and all this other kind of stuff. That's now kind of in the rear view. They know who their coach is now. They can be locked in. And they've done some nice things recruiting wise, portal wise. So I like that one. I think that's a really good underrated team. If I have to go other than Utah, but I still question why the team that won back-to-back Pac-12 titles that has a decent amount of coming back is like being ignored when it comes to title contenders for the Pac-12 by a lot of people.
I think it's just because there's other teams that you would look at and say that team's more talented, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're a better football team.
That was also true last year. It was also true the year before. USC had more talent than Utah last year, and Utah beat them twice. Utah had more talent, or Oregon had more talent than Utah in 2021, and Utah beat them twice. Let me rephrase that. They destroyed them twice. They didn't just beat them twice. Yeah. They destroyed them twice. At least USC was competitive in the regular season game against Utah. But, they're consistently – and then they just have some of those games. You're like, how did you lose that game? How did you beat all those teams and lose that game? But – that Florida-Utah game early is going to be very interesting. So we went overrated. Did we do overrated in the Pac-12, Ryan? We did underrated.
We didn't.
Who's the overrated team in the Pac-12?
I think Oregon's a little bit overrated just because I think that we're not talking enough about the magic that Kenny Dillingham did last year and the fact that he is no longer the offensive coordinator at Oregon, for one. And also, Oregon is one of those teams that is built. I know they ended up recruiting well based upon some factors, right? But they are also a big transfer portal team.
Right.
And last year, their transfer portal pools hits. A lot of them hits, right? The Bo Nix thing hit. My question is now year 2 of getting all these guys in, the Jordan Birches, the Johnny Corneliuses, like these guys, is it sustainable? I'm not sure it is, right? So I think that Oregon might take a slight step back. I mean, I think that they'll go 8-9 wins instead of, the potential Pac-12 champs that we're kind of talking about. So just a slightly overrated team. Slightly overrated.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good one. UCLA is an interesting one. I could argue that they're a tad underrated a little bit in my opinion as well. But I think, look, part of me wants to say USC because people are talking about them as a playoff team, but that just comes down to like Penn State, Ryan. Like they have to prove it.
Yeah.
But they were pretty good last year. I mean, they won 11 games last year, so it's hard for me to say too much about them being overrated. It'd be one thing if a bunch of people were just immediately chalking them up as a playoff team. Then I might jump on that they're a little overrated. They got to prove it first. But I think being in the bottom of the top 10 is incredibly fair for USC because if they can answer some questions, then boom, now they are a playoff team. So I can live with that. Utah, I just don't think is getting enough respect in my view.
Yeah, and USC has the Heisman Trophy winner coming back. So cool.
He's a pretty good player. Yep.
Yes. Pretty decent.
All right. Here's a non-football topic here.
Detroit Hunter's favorite burger place, fast food, or local spots?
Well, I mean, my favorite local spot to eat hamburgers is my house. So I think I make very good hamburgers. So if I would had to pick one though, I mean, I like Five Guys. Five Guys makes good burgers.
Good.
Yeah.
And my favorite bottomless fries that they throw in the bag. It's pretty good.
And I like peanuts and shells, right? Like I just enjoy it reminds me of my childhood going to baseball games. I don't know if that's what you guys did, but every time we go to Reds games, get a big bag of peanuts and eat, so I enjoy that process. Plus I get fidgety, so it gives me something to do with my hands, but it's also a good burger. The only thing, it could make what doesn't matter to me now because I'm not drinking pop anymore, but I hate their fountain. I hate that mix thing that they do. It just always tasted weird. I didn't like that, but the burger was good. My favorite overall burger place is In-N-Out. I am one of those people that is on the In-N-Out bandwagon. I absolutely love In-N-Out.
Never been to In-N-Out before. Yeah. Never been to an In-N-Out.
Yep. Go to one in California if you're ever out there, but I don't know how the ones in Texas are, but I like In-N-Out. It's very, very good. But locally, if I'm going to have a burger in town, Ryan, I'm making it at my house. I'm making a smash burger on my grill the way that I want it, and it's phenomenal. So that's one of the benefits of being a good cook. You don't have to go out to get really good food, which I know you know as well because you do a lot of cooking as well.
Yes, I do.
All right, Raymond Horton.
Next question.
Here we go.
Raymond Harton says, "Do you think we will see the 155 this year?" I sure
Hmm.
hope not.
Maybe on like 3rd and 35, maybe. But no, I don't think we're going to see that.
155. John A1 asks, which Notre Dame quarterback had the most unique skill set? Malik Zaire, Everett Golson, Tyler Buckner.
Of those three, to me, the most unique skill set would probably be Everett. Because I think Everett, like Tyler Buckner is not necessarily unique. There's guys like him. Malik wasn't unique. There's guys like him. Everett to me was unique because he was like everybody talks about his athleticism, but this is a kid that in high school at Myrtle Beach threw for over 12,000 yards and 120 touchdowns in his career. I mean, he was a passer who also was athletic. And I think he went away from that, but he was such a shifty, athletic guy. He was because Everett wasn't fast. He was really quick.
Yeah.
But and he had such
he was like Bryce Youngish as far as like athlete. Like he's bouncy, you know what I mean? Like he's springy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other thing about Everett that gets a little underrated because he's a small, like if you ever see Malik, I don't know what he looks like now because I don't see him in that same setting, but like Malik was a really strong, muscular built kid, right?
Yeah.
And so him having a cannon for an arm wasn't surprising. Everett was a skinny 6 foot, 190-pound kid that had a howitzer connected to his right arm. I mean, like, so that also adds to that uniqueness. Like, when you see Deshaun Kaiser, Ryan, he's like 6'4", 235, 240. You're not surprised he has a strong arm, right?
He's massive.
When you see Everett, you're like, oh, this guy is probably a run around athletic Joe Hamilton type of guy. Nope. Everett had a cannon. So he would be the guy that I would say is of that group is most unique.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think I agree with that one. So,
that would be mine. All right, let's get to some more here.
We had a question from Wyatt Kerwin who said, which Notre Dame jersey number did you have or would you have liked to have growing up? What color jersey and which player was it or would have been for? Mine was green number 3 jersey for Arnaz Battle. So I actually had a 2 jerseys. They were both the same number though. I had a white and I had a blue. It was number 7. And 7 at that time was Carlisle Holiday when I got my first jersey. So Carlisle Holiday, number 7, I suppose.
I never had a Notre Dame jersey. The only jerseys I ever bought, I've never been much of a jersey guy. The only 2 jerseys I ever remember having is I had a Patriots jersey, and I think it was actually Drew Bledsoe actually because I was in high school, so it would have been Drew Bledsoe, but it was more for style. I had a North Carolina number 15 jersey. I'm trying to remember who the name of the quarterback was on that football team. It was, I think, after Oscar Davenport, Ryan. I would have to go. It was around that time. But it was more for, I wore it because it went with my gear and it was more to wear a light blue type of outfit than it was anything else. So it was just, same with the Patriots jersey. I thought the color scheme was pretty cool, and I wore it because of that. So it had more to do with Chris Keldorf is who it was. I don't know if you remember Chris Keldorf. So he was Oscar Davenport. He wasn't very good, but he was okay college quarterback. But those are the only 2 jerseys I ever remember having for college. The only jersey I ever had as a fan and whose number I wore was John Elway. I had Broncos jerseys, and I wore number 7 whenever I could. Now, my senior year of high school, I wore number 9. And because I couldn't wear 7 because they didn't have 7. So my junior and senior year of high school, I wore number 9. And that was because of Tony Rice. So because I couldn't wear number 7. So that would be the one. That would be the one for me. But I never had a Notre Dame jersey. Just the Notre Dame jerseys when I was growing up, they didn't really go with any of my, I was more about color coordination and gear, and wasn't really my thing. So. All right.
Question from Ryan Schultz, who said, saw the Notre Dame video featuring Sam Hartman. Couldn't help but think this was Notre Dame trying to get some Sam Hartman Heisman buzz going. Does Notre Dame need to help to get the buzz going? What should that look like?
I don't know that there's a lot that they can do right now, Ryan, to get buzz going. I mean, what are they going to say? He's 18th all-time in passing yards, 19th all-time in passing yards. 18th. Look, here's what they need to do to get Sam Hartman buzz going. Go win games early, have him put up good numbers, and then you can start your buzz. I mean, no one's going to care about anything else other than that. Now, do I like the video they put out? Yeah, sure. I thought it was cool. But, I mean, you could put out a new Sam Hartman video, hype video every day, and it won't matter until he goes out there on Saturdays and wins, right? It won't matter. You could not say a thing about Sam Hartman from now until the first game of the season. And if he goes out there and balls out, puts up yards, and Notre Dame wins a lot, he's going to be in the Heisman Trophy conversation. So, yeah, I don't think that his play is going to determine. I mean, that's the reality of it.
I think the PR people would be smart to start thinking about some things that they can do, though, if he does start playing really well. Like, okay, now let's implement this strategy to really start getting his buzz out there more. You know, like the Trucker 33 stuff, you know what I mean? Right. Except for Sam Hartman, obviously. So
I'm good with them doing stuff. I've made this case before, Ryan. I think Notre Dame's should do more with the promotion of their football team. Flat out. You know, do a video about all these guys. I'm all for that. It just, to me, it doesn't mean anything regarding Heisman until they go out there and play. I mean, that's just simple as that. It's go out there and play, put up numbers. But then have a strategy planned out that you don't necessarily talk to him or the team about. But hey, look, if he does this, this is what we're gonna do. So that's where I'm coming from. I just don't care to. Not that I don't care. I'd like to see hype, and I like to see those videos. We talk about this all the time. It's not going to influence the Heisman Trophy voting until he goes out there and wins. Yeah, that's just basically what it boils down to. All right.
Next question from Terry Gillery. Mailbag question. Bronte Johnson, Gerby Lamberts, Carter Nelson, Kingston Villanueva, Bradley Shaw, Caleb Beasley, Justin Scott. Missing anyone? Would that be the best class since Weiss?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, yes it would. Yes, it would.
I mean, I as much as I liked last year's class, it would absolutely be better than last year's class.
You know what's pretty crazy too, Brian, is that as I look at that list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys, Notre Dame's in a pretty solid position for, I would say, 4 out of 7 at least at the moment.
Shaw's the only one that I would take off that list because I don't know that they're going to push for him if they get Kingston. Now, if we talked about or was it Monday we talked about this, Ryan? But if Bradley Shaw called tomorrow and said he wanted to come, they'd take him, I think. Sure. But they're not, if they get Kingston, they will have met their needs. So I don't know that they're necessarily really pushing for Bradley Shaw to make a commitment right now. So I would take him off that list. Ryan, I would even argue if you took Caleb Beasley off that list, if they finish with those other 5 guys, this is still the best class that Notre Dame has had since the Weiss era, since the 08 class, in my opinion. I think that in order for it to be, I would even argue if you took, no, I'm not going to say that because I don't want to put that out in the universe and it not happen. But you've got to get Lambert. You've got to get Shaw. If you don't get both in Kingston, if you don't get those in Bronte, those are the 4 most important because those guys are filling needs. Carter Nelson is just a big time player. It's not, Caleb Beasley's not a need. He's a want. Carter Nelson's not a need. He's a want, not a need. Now you want them because they're outstanding football players. But you always got to prioritize the guys that are also outstanding football players that fill positions of need. And that's what those other guys do. But, I mean, this is certainly the best, in my opinion, class since 2018. It's better than the 2013 class. It is. I think C.J. Carr is a better prospect at the same age than Malik was. I think this running back class is every bit as good as that one because I hate saying this because he's passed away, but I never thought Greg Bryant was as good as people thought he was. And I think the other problem I have with that duo was they were kind of the same guy and that you were going to run the same place, whereas Aeneas and Kedron are different players. I think this receiving core is better than that one was as high school prospects. And obviously, Will Fuller became a dude, but he wasn't a big-time prospect. Tight end, Mike Hireman and Durham Smythe were, I believe Durham Smythe was the other tight end in that class. I believe he wasn't 2014. Let me go look at that real quick. I could be wrong on that one. I thought Durham Smythe was in that class. The offensive line class that year as recruits would be better. I mean, that was Steve Elmer was highly ranked. Hunter Bivin was highly ranked. Mike McGlinchey was a guy with a ton of upside. Colin McGovern was a guy I liked on film. And then John Montelis was also a top 100 guy by Rivals, which I thought he was very overrated. But that's a 5-man class. It's as good, if not better, than this one. The 2013 defensive line class, Ryan, is not nearly as good as this class would be if they got Justin Scott. I mean, it's not even close, in my opinion. And I like that class. You had Isaac Rochelle, you had Doug Randolph, you had who was the other kid? Jacob Matuska. That was one of the weaknesses of that class, was the defensive line, because I'm not counting Eddie Vanderdoes. But here's the thing. Even if you count Eddie Vanderdoes, Isaac Rochelle, Doug Randolph, and Jacob Matuska is not nearly as good of a class as the 5-man class that this would be if they get Justin Scott, in my opinion.
Sure.
Linebacker class would be better in 2013 because of Jalen. The other two guys, to me, Michael D versus Bodie Cahoon, I mean, that's similar, but Jalen Smith was just, I mean, an elite player. Secondary wise, the safety class was pretty good that year, in my opinion. You had, with Max Redfield, you had James Onwualu was considered a receiver in that class, but you had Max Redfield was a good safety. Cole Luke and Devin Butler at corner were pretty good. But you were short. I wasn't a big Rashad Kinlaw fan, so I didn't love him. I mean, if they get Bronte Johnson, it's very similar. My feelings of Cole Luke and Leonard Moore coming out of high school are very similar. My comp for Carson Hobbs was Devin Butler. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like very similar players. Max Redfield was a better prospect than Bronte Johnson was, but you've got Kennedy Urlacher, and so this DB class is very similar. Linebacker then is better, but D-line class is better. Quarterback is better. Receiver's better. If they get Carter Nelson, tight end is definitely better. O-line is close, but I'd give the edge to 13. So the only places I'd really give 13 the edge, Ryan, would be what, linebacker and O-line.
Yep.
There's some washes in there, but I'd give it to 2020, the 2024 class, if you get all these guys. And if you get Caleb Beasley, then it's easily the DB class is better. Easily, it's better. And I would even argue if you get Bradley Shaw, then we could have an argument if that linebacker class this year is better because it has more guys, even though no one's as good as Jalen. I mean, no one's as good as close to being as good as Jalen. Would you say 13 is probably their second best class? Because I think last year's class, if they would have got Hillman and I mean Peyton Bowen and Keon, it's the best. It would have been their best class. But when they lost those guys, it fell below the 2013 class to me, in my view, because it just didn't have any elite players. And the 13 had a couple elite players.
Which is very good all around class last year.
Yeah. Do you remember the 2008 class, Ryan? Which I thought was Charlie's best class.
2008.
It was Dane Christ at quarterback, Jonas Gray at running backs, top 100 guy. You had Michael Floyd and Deion Walker, John Goodman at receiver, Kyle Rudolph at tight end. You had Darius Fleming and Steve Filer on the defensive line. Ethan Johnson was on that defensive line class. You had the DB class was also really good. You had Robert Blanton was part of that class in the secondary. You had Jamor Slaughter and Dan McCarthy. I thought Dan McCarthy was the best prospect of all of them. If Dan McCarthy doesn't have injuries, I think he would have been a heck of a college football player. Sean Swinar was ranked pretty high player coming out. Anthony McDonald. The one bad take they had that year was David Puslesny, who was and the other tight end in that class I forgot too, Ryan. They had Kyle Rudolph, but they also have Joseph Fourier was the other tight end in that class. They signed Joseph Fourier in that class. And then offensive line.
He transferred and ended up being pretty good, right? Fourier?
Yeah, at UCLA. Good. Yeah, he got in trouble, so he didn't transfer on his own. His own desires. And the O-line class ended up being pretty good too. I mean, three of your two of your starters on your 2012 team were guys from this class, and Braxton Cave and Mike Golick. And they also had Trevor Robinson in that class. I really like Lane Cleveland coming out of high school, but he ended up not doing anything. But that was to me still their best class. But I believe that if they get the 6 of the 7 guys down here, this class is better than that. I think if you get those guys, Ryan, I would argue this is the best class Notre Dame has had since Lou Holtz was a coach at Notre Dame. I really would say that. But they've got to hit all but Bradley Shaw in order to do that, in my opinion. So Thoughts on that? A little bit too far gone, too long ago to compare him to some of those
man. We're
tie. I
comparing
mean,
like
obviously,
6 different classes right now. So.
yeah, yeah. So what's that? What'd you say? I didn't. Okay, Ryan just went away again, so I don't know what he said. All right, so let's go to some more questions here. Let's go back up top to John. John A1 says, depending on who wins the starting guard spots, the O-line could be very different style-wise. Kristovic and Shroud seem to be athletic combo, but the Rocco and Jagger Maulers, what's the best style fit for what project to be strength of the skill spots, power interior, or balance athletic? I'm going to somewhat push back a little bit on this, John, in that I think that Shrouth is athletic, but I think Shrouth is also he is how do I say this? Athletic and powerful. Like he's a bit of a combo guy, but I think he can fit a power system as well as a athletic system. So I would say he is a guy that fits the power system. I don't think you change your point is I don't think you change your style as run blocking wise with him or Jagasol or Rocco. I think you do a little bit with Shrouth. So, but I don't know that I would necessarily call Andrew Kristofic athletic at this point in time. I think he's just do your job, decent footwork, good technique, just get the job done kind of guy. I wouldn't necessarily call him an athletic combo anymore with the way he's put on. But what's the strengths of the skill spots? Look, I think Notre Dame wants to be a physical push you off the line team. And so obviously the Jagasol, the Spindler, and the Shrouths are the best guys for that. So I think those are the guys that I'm going to look at and focus on for those. See if we have any super chats down here. Yeah, we had a couple pop up here. We got Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler, very, very much. How would you guys fix the Pac-12 conference? I don't know that the Pac-12 conference can be fixed, to be completely honest with you, Tyler, unless you could get – I don't know that you can fix it without the LA teams. Is the point. I don't think that there's putting that genie back in the bottle. I think you can salvage it to where it can survive for a little bit, but I don't think you can fix it because you can't fix a population. You can't make a population care about your sports programs. I don't know that there's anything you can do other than saying, okay, all of a sudden you're going to make 8 of the 12 best teams in college football be teams from the Pac-12 because West Coast fans and football for college sports will jump on the bandwagon, but as soon as you stop winning, they're back off of it. So I honestly don't know that you can fix them. We could talk about, get better TV deals, but part of the problem with the TV deals is you just don't have the audience that watches college sports on the West Coast. And that's my 2 cents on that one. Jim D. Mateus with a super chat. Thank you, Jim, very, very much. Have a good weekend. Enjoyed listening to the mailbag. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. Let's see here. Terry Gillery says, what would it say for Marcus Freeman to be the first Black national championship coach? I mean, we talked about this the other day. I don't think it says anything about Marcus Freeman to be the first Black coach. I think it would be more momentous for the sport than so for him. I think the big thing that Marcus Freeman has always made very clear, and I tend to agree with this, is big picture wise, there's a level of celebrating something because it shows progress or things along those lines. But Marcus Freeman's thing has always been adamant about, I don't want to be known as a Black coach. He embraces his heritage. It's not so much, I don't want to be known as Black. It's more about, why am I not just a football coach? You don't say, well, he's a good white coach. You say, he's a good coach. And I think his whole thing is I'm embracing my heritage, the Black part of his heritage, the Asian part of his heritage, and he's proud of who he is because he's proud of his father, who is a Black man. He's proud of his mother, who's an Asian woman, and the manner in which he was raised and the man he created him to be. And he's also very aware of what something like that would mean. But his whole thing is, don't define me because of the color of my skin. Define me by the job that I do. And he's always been very adamant about that. He's always answered that question extremely well, is stop putting me in this box, right? Like, yes, it is important. And he had some great answers, I thought, about this on the Pivot interview, where it's kind of like he understands that, and this is where it matters, is it doesn't even matter for Marcus Freeman that he's the first Black coach to win a championship. It's not about him. he understands the impact that would have, right or wrong, on the doors that it would open for other black coaches to get those opportunities, including some from his own staff, with Dylan McCullough, Mike Mickens, Chancey Stuckey, guys like that, to say, hey, look, there's a hesitance for whatever reason, whether it's you believe it's just people don't want to hire black coaches because there's not a track record of success, whether it's because there just aren't a lot of, candidates, whatever the case may be. You can make a lot of reasons why, but some of it is clearly there's just a hesitancy for whatever reason. And I have my reasons why I think some do. Some of it's understandable. Some of it's total bullcrap. But once that door gets kicked down, especially at a place like Notre Dame, then the excuses are gone. Do you want to win or not? Right. And if you want to win, then you need to leave your interviews up into the best coach. And sometimes that's going to be a white guy. Sometimes it's going to be a black guy. Sometimes it might be a Hispanic guy, an Asian guy, whatever the case may be. But I think that's the impact that it has. It's not so much what would it say for Marcus Freeman. I think where Marcus Freeman would say is it's not me, it's the doors that he knows that this would open. And for other coaches that are kind of coming along and to say, hey, look, you can try to put me in this box, but here's the reality of it. I am black, I am Asian, and I am a great coach. This is what matters right here. And you should hire people based on who they are and not have these stereotypes about whether it's a running backs coach or because of someone's race, whatever the case may be. So I think the impact would do a lot more for the college football world as a whole and opening up opportunities than anything it would say specifically for Marcus Freeman or for Notre Dame. And I think that's where Coach Freeman's focus is when it comes to this particular topic. Is he doesn't want to be defined as he wants to be defined as a great husband, a great father, and a great football coach who cares about his players and does things the right way. And that this is just kind of, okay, this isn't what, because I'm this. That's not who I am. I'm this. But it would certainly open up opportunities. That's a fact. Braden Spatar, thank you very much for that super chat. And another one. He says, what is your guys' confidence level from 0 to 100? I want to, again, remind people that I have an article about every prospect on the board outside of Bronte Johnson, because he's going to make a decision tomorrow, where I give my 1 to 10. And if you want to know my level 4 percentage-wise, add a 0 onto each one of the numbers that I give. So I appreciate the super chat, but there's an article that goes into where we are and why I feel that way about all of those different recruitments. So please check that out. Braden, appreciate the super chat very much. And then we have a super chat from John A2, whoever the heck that is. If Notre Dame wins the 2003 national championship, what's the one stat you look back on and say that was the key? So I'm going to give you one on both sides of the ball. The one on offense I'm going to give you is, if I could go to one stat, it would be they're going to average over 7 yards per play, 7 yards or more per play offensively, overall, not run, pass, but just overall. Defensively, it would be the run game disruptions. So tackles for loss in the run game. I think that speaks to creating a lot of other things that could open up opportunities for Notre Dame defensively. I think that is the thing that leads to, if you're getting a lot of negatives in the run game, it's going to lead to more the offense being behind the sticks more, meaning more second and longs, more third and longs, which creates more opportunities to have to throw the football, which then leads to more opportunities for turnovers and for pass breakups and those type of things. So I think all of those things factor into what then makes you a championship caliber defense. But I think it begins with the run game disruptions. I think the other part of it too is if you're getting a lot more tackles for loss, it means your D line's playing at a high level, and it means your linebackers are playing at a high level. I think those things are big factors in this conversation. Somebody says turnovers. I think that can be a tad overrated. Honestly, I think it can be a tad overrated, because it doesn't tell you how. Again, don't look at turnovers. I think it's an overrated statistics, because their turnovers are defined by other things. It's focus on the stats that lead to the turnover margin being what it is, offensively and defensively. And that's why I think the focus should be on other aspects of that. Let's get to some more questions here. So John A2, thank you for that question. All right. Here's one from let's get here. This is one from JP Buellsfeld. He says, Brian and Ryan, I'm not a fan of the Shamrock game. What is your opinion of Shamrock and why? JP, I like it in theory. It's like with anything else. It's how is it executed, right? Like that's my big thing is I think there's a lot of things that in theory are great ideas, but the manner in which it's carried out makes it a something that I'm not a big fan of. And so the Shamrock Series game to me, if you're having opponents that just aren't good, in my opinion, then it takes away from it. If you're going to locations that just are like, why are you going there? It takes away from it. I tend to like a lot of the like playing Syracuse in New York was I love that. Playing Boston College in Fenway, that's a really cool deal. You're playing in venues that are just these kids don't get a chance to play in. Playing Purdue at like Ford, not Ford, but what's the name of wherever the Colts play? I forget the name of where the Colts play, but like to me, that's like whatever. It is what it is. It doesn't really fire me up. It's like playing Washington State and San Antonio, whatever. That didn't really do a whole lot for me. Even the Army game in San Antonio didn't do a whole lot for me because I know that there's a big Army base in San Antonio, but like that's not. I mean, if you want to play Army, play them at Yankee Stadium. I mean, think of the tradition there. And again, as I've said, it would be, I think it would be, I think it'd be a situation where. Um, I'd rather just play at West Point. So, like, give me 1 second. Ryan's having some issues. Um, I need to just respond to him here real quick. So, sounds like we're having some weather issues, and that's why he keeps cutting out. All right, so let's go to a few more here. Let's see here. I want to get to some more of these questions. Um, all right, here's Pete Weber. Pete asks, if you could go back in time and witness any 3 events in the history of the world in person, what would they be? Oh my gosh. I would say, well, 2 of them are gonna be kinda the same person, so it's, maybe a bit I don't know. I would say I would wanna go look, okay, so I'm a Christian, so 2 of these are gonna be ones that I've always in my head I would love to have seen. So number 1 is, uh, one of the sermons that Jesus had where obviously the sermons were powerful, but then also the feeding of people that, with the limited things, some of the miracles he did would have been pretty cool to see. And then the resurrection. I would have loved to see a resurrected Christ, obviously, a resurrected Jesus, or Yeshua would have actually been his name. So I think that would have been fascinating to see. And then the other one is more United States of America. I would have loved to have been there for the first time the Declaration of Independence was read out loud. That would have been something that would have been pretty cool to see. Sports wise, if I could see in person, to me, I would have loved to have been to a Super Bowl that John Elway played in. That'd have been pretty cool. So I would have loved to have been at the Super Bowl. Would it be 32, right, where they beat the Packers, or in 33 or Super Bowl 33 where they beat the Falcons? Because at least then I could have said, "Hey, I watched John Elway's last game." Because here's the depressing thing about it: I was a big Broncos fan, big John Elway fan, but the only game I ever saw him play in person, they lost. It was a Monday night game against the Dolphins in 1997, the year that they won their first Super Bowl. Now, they ended up blowing the Dolphins out in the playoffs later that year, but they lost that particular game, which was kind of sad and depressing. So I would have liked to seen one of those as a sports event. And, I would have loved to seen Larry Bird. I would have loved to seen, okay, so since I would want to see one that the Celtics actually won, I would have loved to have seen a game in 1984, a finals game. Actually, I'll just tell you exactly which game it is. So I'll tell you. I'll tell you exactly which game I would have liked to have gone to, and so just give me a second to pull this up. So it had been one of the 1984 games between the Lakers and Celtics. So I would have liked to have seen. It was game 2, is what it was. It was the overtime game where the Celtics won 124 to 121. That's a game I would have liked to have seen. And of course, the Celtics ended up winning the championship that year, 4 games to 3. So that would have been a cool thing to see. So 1984 finals, and then Yeah, watching the Reds, being at one of the Reds games, game one of the 1990 World Series. That'd be the other one. Where Eric Davis hits the home run, Jose Rio just mows down the A's. That would have been another sports event I thought would have been really cool to be at. Yeah. And then, Notre Dame wise, I would love to have been at the 1988 Notre Dame Miami game. That would be the one for me that I'd want to go to. So good questions, Pete. But those would be, so I gave you some life world ones, and then I gave you some sports ones. So there you go. All right, let's go to hear from Andrew Hoffman. What are your favorite non-football podcasts, if any? If you had time to do another podcast, what would it be about? Oh, this is a good one, Andrew. So I've actually thought about this. So the only other podcast I listen to is a guy named Steve Dace is the only other one that I listen to. I would love to listen. I want to find some people have given me some like true crime suggestions. I need to find some true crime ones. I would listen to that. I enjoy those type of things. A history podcast I would listen to. But Steve Dace is the only one that I have really time to listen to now because I can kind of put it on while I'm mowing the lawn or I'm getting some work done, having it in the background. And it's a political podcast. But if I could do another podcast, obviously people that know me know I love talking politics. So I would, of course, love to do a political show. But the other one is I would love to do, I've thought about doing one of two things, obviously like a show where I'm talking about, like, you see these guys giving gun reviews. So like they get like, companies will send them new guns and they'll shoot them and test them and all that. That'd be kind of fun. But you know what I think I'd like to do? And I think Ryan, because Ryan's back, he's pulling up questions. I think he'd laugh. He's going to laugh at me for this one. But I would really like to do a cooking show because I love to cook. You know what I mean? So if I was going to do another podcast, I would do one where I just like, okay, here's the different foods I like. We're going to make it and just do that whole process because I really enjoy to cook. And so I think I would really very much enjoy having a cooking show. I think that'd be a lot of fun. So yeah, that'd be a good one. Be a good one. S. Rower, I think is what it is. So it says, how much of poor safety recruiting would you put on O'Leary and how much would you put on the situation? Seems like we were in a good position with Nwankpa and Bowen before some unfortunate events. I don't think the Bowen was an unfortunate event. Part two is if it were hypothetically were to land Nwankpa and Bowen, how would you feel about O'Leary's recruiter? Well, clearly if he got results, look, the feeling of a coach is based on the results, or it should be. If you're evaluating a guy because you don't like him for whatever other reason, that's fine. That's you do you. But your support of a coach should be off the results. If the results were different, if he would have got Xavier Nwankpa, if he would have got Peyton Bowen, then clearly we're having a different conversation. Because if you get Nwankpa and Bowen and Schuler and Minich and Bronte Johnson and Urlacher, I'm good with taking Tabron Benny Powell because you clearly saw something that you liked and it wasn't a reach because you're loaded there. I'm cool with it. So of course you'd have a different opinion if you got those guys because, the reality is the results would be he's getting the job done, but he didn't get those guys. And so you can say, well, it's circumstances and all that kind of stuff. But here's the deal. You went from Xavier Nwankpa maybe in the class to no one. You got no one at safety in that class. Jaden Bellamy might have played safety, but they were going to convert him from another position. And I don't believe Chris O'Leary was his primary recruiter. And then last year's class, I mean, look, you can say he lost this guy, that guy, the other guy, but it's your job to not lose those guys. It's your job to know that something happened during Xavier's visit and to fix it and smooth it over before he goes a month and lets that emotion boils up. That's your job as a coach. And so, yes, circumstances happen, but you've got to be on top of those circumstances. You've got to say, hey, look, this kid's telling me one thing, but his actions for the last 3 months have been completely opposite. We got to be prepared to have another answer. And that's your job. And, they weren't able to do it. And so that's why the results, the criticism is there. Because, like, if you notice, I haven't criticized Al Washington as much lately. Why? It's not because I like him better. It's not because he and I had a talk and had a heart-to-heart, and I'm not going to criticize him anymore because we didn't do that. I've never talked to the guy. It's because he went out and got Cole Mullins, and he went out and got Logan Thomas. And I think those guys are outstanding players, and those were not easy recruitments to get. And so I'm like, hey, great job. The results are changing. Now you got to get Justin Scott to completely take it over the edge. And so, that's kind of the thing for me is I need to see results. And if the results are good, then I'll praise you. If the results are bad, then I won't. And the other thing too, and to this question is, at some point in time when the circumstances and the situations keep happening at the same position, it's not a coincidence. That's the last part about it that we need to accept and embrace is it's not a coincidence when it keeps happening to the same position. You either have the worst luck in the world or you're part of the problem. And that's kind of what I would point to on that one. I have a question from Raymond Hartman. Hey, fellas, happy Friday. Can't wait for the weekend show. Same here. Saturdays have been good to us lately. There's no doubt about that, Raymond. Thank you for the super chat, Raymond. Very, very, very much. John A1 says, last year, Notre Dame had Michael Mayer as the go-to pass catcher. Does the 23 team need an established top dog, or should it be more of a hot hand guy game to game? So it's a little bit of both, John. I would encourage you to listen to the receiver podcast we did on Tuesday, because we dive a little bit into this. I think it's a little bit of both. I think that you need at least a guy that can influence the defense to, like, they have to defend what you're doing, and based on him, they can't game plan here and leave him exposed. He isn't going to influence how the defense game plans. I think you need a guy like that. Now, from the other part, as far as the top dog game to game, there's merit to that as well. It's two different things. One is this guy's play and talent forces the defense to game plan for him. But, so let's say it's, Tobias Merriweather's our top dog, big picture. Teams are defending him scheme-wise. But Jaden Thomas is the guy that stepped up and made those money plays. A perfect example is Clemson 2016, right? Mike Williams was the big dog. That was the top alpha dog on that team. But who made the game-winning catch for the championship that year? It was Hunter Renfrow, right? So that may change game to game. Who made the big catch earlier in that game that got a struggling Clemson offense that was down 14-0 to Bama going? It was Deion Kane. But here's the thing. Bama was playing to stop Mike Williams, which opened up some opportunities for Deion Kane and other players to make plays. And so it's a little bit of both, in my opinion. And because you don't have a Michael Mayer, I think you need those guys at the receiver position. So that's kind of my answer for that one. So good question on that one. Taylor Jewelry says, do you think we are recruiting Cali less and Texas more because Cali kids are soft and parents don't raise their kids right in the state? Seems we are trending away from Cali besides the select flu. I don't think that has anything to do with it. No, I mean, are there some kids from Cali that are soft? Sure. There's kids from Ohio that are soft. There's kids from Texas that are soft. I think they're recruiting Texas more because there's more kids that fit with what they're doing. One of the toughest kids Notre Dame is recruiting in the 2023-4 class, physically tough, mentally tough, is Kingston William Asa. I actually heard an interview where he said his name, it's Asa, so I've been saying it incorrectly. I apologize. But it is he's a tough kid. They've tried to recruit Cali. I think the results are dictating it. But I think Texas tends to have more schools, more people that just fit with what Notre Dame's trying to do. West Coast is just a different animal. So, no, I don't think it's because kids are soft and parents don't raise their kids right. I know that you all know I'm not a fan of California at all. I would never live there. That's a political thing. There's some safety reasons, but you know what? A state that big, there are a lot of people in that state doing it the right way. A lot of people. If the majority of the people were not living the right way, it'd be utter anarchy. And, it just would be a terrible situation. There's a lot of good parents and a lot of good kids coming from California. I just think that the best schools in California it's been tough for Notre Dame to get kids out of it. It's been tough for Notre Dame to get kids out of Mater Dei. It's been tough to get kids out of Bishop Gorman. But clearly they're still putting an emphasis in the state. They got Rico Flores last year. They got Cooper Flanagan last year. They're hoping to get Kingston this year. So the state is still important to Notre Dame. But right now, Texas there's just more that fits what Notre Dame's trying to do. I think that's the reason that they're trying to recruit it more, not what you just said. Jordan Schreiber says, what was your impression of Marcus Freeman talking about the defense understanding the scheme better and playing faster better in year 2? So you believe that to be true, that it's going to show this year? Jordan, I've said this. Ryan and I have talked about this plenty of times. And we've been consistent about this for a long time. Even if Al Golden's not a good coach, the fact of the matter is there's going to be improvement. And this is a point that I made in the article I wrote. If you look at what Notre Dame did after the Stanford game defensively, they gave up, I think it was like 312 yards per game, something like that. If you put that over the course of the entire season, they rank like 12th in total defense. They're top 25 in yards per play. So even last year, with the issues that we all talk about, the defense was still a quality defense. Everybody's coming back. If Al Golden doesn't change a thing, it's going to be better because everybody knows the system now. And so plays where, Cam Hart's letting a completion happen and then tackling the guy. Now with that knowledge of the defense and I'm reacting quicker, I'm in better position. Instead of being lined up here, I'm lined up here. And that little difference can truly in football be the difference. If you're lined up here, but you're supposed to be here, that can be the difference for a cornerback coming through the backside of a guy and making the tackle at the moment of the completion, or a guy being here and undercutting that route and either picking it off himself or getting a hand on it and causing the ball to go up in the air and somebody else picks it off. So those little things like that are important, that are why Ryan and I have said, as long as like certain players step up, that this defense has a chance to be better this year, even if you feel a negative way about Al Golden because of that experience in the system. Caleb Collins says, how big of a drop-off is special teams going to be? I don't know why we're assuming it's going to be a drop-off. They may not block as many kicks, but there's plenty of areas for the special teams to improve. And we'll find out if they will or won't. But I think it's unfair to say that. I think it's unfair to say that. We'll see. But I could see them not being as disruptive with block kicks, but being better in coverage, being better in returns, and it's a wash, or even being better. I don't accept that premise. Guns and Buns, if you have to pick who is Notre Dame's special teams player of the year, who are you going with? Well, I hope it's Spencer Schrader. That's why I always hope it's the kicker, because that means he made all his kicks and he had some big money, big game kicks is who I would think it would be. If I had to pick like a non-specialist and I couldn't pick like Michael Vincent because he's just money every time, or your kicker or punter, my prediction is going to be Nolan Ziegler. That's my prediction for top special teams guy, because I think he's going to be on a lot of special teams and a lot of coverage units this year. So good question. Great name, by the way. That's hilarious. Guns and Buns. That's awesome. JHT 1988. How should Notre Dame handle getting Minchie reps early, assuming he wins the backup role? Does Parker ensure he gets some passes in early games where Notre Dame is heavily favored? No. I mean, look, I understand where you're coming from, and it's a good theory, but I'm trying to get Sam Hartman rolling first. So there's not going to be any early game opportunities for my number 2 quarterback. Where my number 2 quarterback is going to get opportunities, hey, let's go blow Navy out and then get him in there maybe a little bit early then. So it's 34-3 late in third quarter, maybe getting him in then, let him get a few completions in. Those are different things that I would do. But honestly, JHT, the key for me is getting him the work in practice. That's going to be the key. And then if you can because here's the deal. Kenny Minchie going 5 of 7 in the fourth quarter of games where you're up by 30 does not prepare him for having to be the starting quarterback against Ohio State should something happen to Sam Hartman. It doesn't. It's the preparation in the week of practices that will determine that. But I would say when I have a young quarterback like that, my overall philosophy is when you get the big lead, give him a series with the starting offense. That's all that I ask for. And then when you do put him in with the backups, let him get some couple throws. Don't just line up in 13 personnel and run the ball 3 and out every time. Let him run the offense. Let him run some RPOs. Let him run some, regular pass game. I'm not like throwing bombs, but let him play. Yeah, that's the thing. Let the kid play. It's a development opportunity for him. Luke Breeding, is Davis Andrews still being recruited? Absolutely. He is absolutely still being recruited. It's just he's not going to most likely be part of the 24 class now. But yes, Notre Dame absolutely still wants Davis Andrews. Even if he's going to go on a Mormon mission, they absolutely still want him to be part of the program. Yes, they do. John A1, on Irish Breakdown, it's been discussed how wide receivers' vertical speed ability can open rush lanes for big runs. Which wide receiver groupings is the best complement to the run game at Notre Dame in 2023? That is a great question. I would say that the best complement to the run game, if we're going to go 11 personnel, would be Tobias Merriweather as an X. And again, this is just if I had to pick 3 starters. Tobias Merriweather at X, Jaden Thomas at Z, Jaden Thomas at F, and Deion Colsey in the boundary at X would probably be it. You could also make a case, because that's big guys that can also block, but also can make plays. But I think another one would be maybe putting Jaden Thomas at the X and Chris Tyree at the F. So now the complement to the run game instead of the big blockers is we're running the mess out of RPOs. So I think those would be the two different potential lineups that I would go with to say that would best complement the Notre Dame run game, in my opinion, because you have more big playability in that second group as well. Pete Weber says, which Notre Dame player in the past was the biggest stretch in terms of being a take as a recruit that ended up being an elite talent? Boy, that's a good question. I don't know if I've ever seen a guy that was a stretch to take as a recruit that became elite. I think there's some guys that were stretches as recruits that I thought became good players. I didn't love Matthias Farley as a pickup. He ended up being a pretty solid player. Kyron Williams would probably be the best example of that. But I don't even think Kyron was a stretch. It's just like obviously he was a plan B guy, but I wouldn't call him a stretch. I'd have to think about that one, Pete. Mr. Weber. I have to think about that one. Stretch. Yeah, I mean, because low ranked doesn't equal stretch. I honestly don't know that I've seen a guy that was like, why are they offering that guy? That guy has no business being at Notre Dame, and then boom, he goes out and he's elite. I don't know that I've seen that happen before at Notre Dame, to be honest with you. Irish Mills 540. Brian, can you touch more on the Marcus Freeman interview when you mentioned he lit up and almost cut you off and said, amen? What did that mean to you? And I told you I'm at 1510 excitement. Where are you? Well, that was meant to be more of a message board conversation, Irish Mills. That's why I didn't put it into an article. But, well, it just meant that he's just confident in his team. I mean, he's really confident in the talent. We've been telling you all this for a while. They may be wrong, but this Notre Dame coaching staff is very excited about the talent of their current team. 15-10 excitement. I'm still at an 8 simply because I have a lot of work to do before fall camp starts. So I want to get some of that done. But in all seriousness, I mean, I'm very excited about this team. I cannot wait to watch this team play. I really can. I'm looking forward to saying, okay, are they going to be good? Are they going to be good for what I want them to be? I mean, are they going to be as good as I think they can be? Are they a team that's going to go out and play to the level that I think they're capable of, or are they going to disappoint again? That's kind of where I'm at on that. I'm excited. More so, I'm excited. Jake Roosman, who do you guys see being the next commit in the 25 class? I don't know who that is going to be. I could see, I don't know. I could see Owen Strebig maybe deciding soon. I could see Rowan Byrne, maybe Cree Thomas, one of those guys deciding soon. Derek Meadows, maybe. Jerome Bettis Jr., maybe. I think those would probably, off the top of my head, guys that first pop in. Ryan, anybody that I'm kind of leaving out of that conversation, no, I think those are the guys that we most likely think are most likely options. So, yeah. Michael Pate asks, what is your biggest what ifs as a Notre Dame fan? Mine are if Notre Dame had a competent defensive coordinator in 2015 or if Kaiser comes back in 2017, think both could have won a title. Michael Pate, I'm assuming you're very young. And for a younger person, I would agree with both of those ones. I think those would have been very interesting. But I would say Kaiser, not so much for me because Kaiser wasn't a leader. And yeah, he wasn't a leader, and you need a leader at quarterback. I'd say for me, what if Jimmy Clausen, and if we're going to go recently, what if Jimmy Clausen and Golden Tate came back in 2010? That'd have been a lot of fun to watch. The two biggest what ifs for me, there's really three for me from my lifetime. What if Randy Moss was able to come to Notre Dame? That's a big one. What if Pete Bursich picks off that pass against Boston College, or David Gordon misses the kick? That's another one for me. And then the third, this is going to be funny. What if Miami doesn't convert that 3rd and 43? Does Notre Dame win back-to-back championships that year? I think they would have. I do. I think they would have. But we'll never find out. But those are the biggest ones of my life. And I think the most recent, it's the Jimmy Clausen, Golden Tate. What if they come back in 2010? That'd have been very interesting to see, buddy. Very interesting to see. We have a super chat from Sparkling Swan. Thank you very, very much. Twilight Zone scenario. Would you rather A, Notre Dame join a conference knowing they'd win a few national championships in the future, or B, stay independent and never win a championship again? I mean, obviously, if you're going to pick one of those two, you want to win you want to win multiple championships in the future. But So if I had to pick one of those, I'm going to respect your question. I would rather pick a conference because it means you can win championships. I don't believe that being independent keeps them from winning championships. But if you were to tell me, hey, I have looked into the future and I've seen two alternate realities. One is they join a conference and they win multiple championships the next 15, 20 years. The other is they stay independent and they never win another title. I mean, it's all about winning at the end of the day, and if you were to tell me that there's no way they can win this way, then I'd say, okay, then fix it and do what you got to do to go win. Guns and Buns, most important recruit that Brian Kelly ever landed. Boy, that is a very, very good question. I don't know if I have one guy that I can point to because they never won a title. So I don't know that I could say that. I mean, and a lot of the best players for the 2012 team were guys he inherited. Manti, Tyler Eifert. Maybe you could say Everett Golson because I don't know if they get to the title game in 12 if Tommy Reese is the quarterback all year, to be honest with you. So I don't know that I have an answer for that one. Who most important recruit at Peak ever landed? Jalen Smith. That's one. Jalen Smith. I don't know if Jalen Smith. He was a heck of a player. That's where I'm going to go if I had to pick one. But I don't know if there's like that one guy. I think to me, most important recruit you ever land is a guy because like if you don't get him, you don't win a title, right? I don't think Notre Dame had that obviously because they didn't win a title. As a unit, the 2017 linebacker group performed really well. Does the 2023 linebacker room have greater than 50% chance of matching that group's level of play? I would say yes. This 2017 group, you had Tavon Coney, you had Drew Tranquil at Rover, you had Niles Morgan and Greer Martini. I think that JD Bertrand could be comparable to what Tavon Coney did production-wise. I don't know that they're going to use the Rover as much, but I think Jack Kaiser could make some plays. I think that, whoever the will is has a chance. I'd say 60% more. So I'd go over 50. Yeah, go over 50. Not significantly far over 50. But, yeah, I'd do that. I'd go over 50. Jordan Schreiber, seems like there's so many more elite 25 players flocking to visit Notre Dame compared to the past. Why do you think that is? I just think that because there's still a lot of buzz about Marcus Freeman. And I think that I've made this case to a buddy of mine the other day. I said, what you have to remember is, so if a kid is a rising senior, now he's probably 17 years old and on average. So when Notre Dame played for the national championship in 2012, that kid was 6. So if you think about it, his entire existence of Notre Dame football has been with Notre Dame being a really good team. Now you've got a head coach that a lot of kids like and want to play for. He's charismatic. He's genuine. He's a lot of different things. You've got a staff that as a whole is working much harder than the previous staff that, even though there's still some issues, yeah, I can see why. I think it's just a hotter program right now. And that's why I've said before, this football season is huge for Notre Dame because you've got to continue making yourself an attractive place. If you go 9-4 again, you lose a lot of that buzz. And I think the way that they finished last year, 6 out of 7 wins, beating Clemson the way that they did, beating South Carolina the way that they did, to the earlier question that John A1 brought up about you ended the season on a win. Winning 6 out of 7 with a win. There's a lot more momentum. I think that's it. And I think the staff, led by Chad Bowden and the director of recruiting, has done a great job of getting a lot of really good players, not just on campus to visit, but to come to camps. I think it's been huge. It's been huge. Archer452 said, did you see Josh Pate's recent video about Notre Dame's expectations for 23? It felt very fair and realistic, and he's someone who frequently defends bad takes regarding Notre Dame nationally. I did not see it, but I know that he has pushed back on a lot of bad arguments about Notre Dame in the past. So I didn't see this particular one, so I don't know what he said, so I can't really respond to it. Ryan Loftus asks, if Al Golden leaves for the NFL or head coaching job, does Marcus Freeman go to James Laurinaitis for the DC position, or is Laurinaitis not skilled enough yet for that role? There's a lot of reasons I wouldn't do that. Number one, I don't think he's ready. I don't think just because you played in the NFL means you're ready to become a defensive coordinator in 2 years. Some are. I mean, what was Jim Leonard's resume like before he got the job at Wisconsin? I don't know that he was necessarily a guy that had coached for a long time. Actually, let me look that up real quick. He was an assistant coach for a year at Wisconsin before, getting that job. So, I mean, some guys can do it. I wasn't overly impressed by the job the linebackers did last year. I don't necessarily blame that all on James Laurinaitis, but he's got a lot to prove. But here'd be my other concern. You hire him as your defensive coordinator. He does a great job, and Ohio State's defensive coordinator job comes open, and he's going to leave you for it. That'd be my concern. So, no, I would never hire James Laurinaitis again. It's not a personal thing. I don't dislike him. I have heard nothing but good things about him as a human being. It's very clear that Ohio State's where he wants to be. So I'm not going to have him come in and then invest in him to build my defense up, knowing that if there's any opportunity for him to leave for Ohio State, he's going to take it. I just can't do that. I wouldn't have that trust. And not out of spite or any anger. I have no ill will whatsoever towards James Laurinaitis. You have to be smart about these things, right? Especially it'd be one thing if you're just going to hire him as a linebackers coach, but as the defensive coordinator, no, I'm not going there. Connor O'Doherty, I also think that Jordan Patel has a shot to be great this year. Does he have All-American potential? I mean, if the numbers are good enough, sure. I mean, if Jordan Patel goes out this year and has, 11 sacks and 15 tackles for loss and a couple big game-changing plays, sure, he could be an All-American. Sure. Absolutely. Terry Gillery, how big is Dorian Brew to the 25 class? Have we ever landed a cornerback of that caliber? That's not even taking into account Devin Williams. Well, number one, I mean, if you're talking about recruiting rankings, okay, then I'd say it's been a while, but I would argue that Benjamin Morrison is as good of a player as Dorian Brew is, and that's saying a lot because I think very highly of Dorian Brew. But yeah, they've landed guys like that in the past. Christian Gray was ranked pretty high last year. I don't know if he was ranked quite as high as Dorian Brew is, but of course his recruiting process isn't over yet, so we'll see if he goes up or down. Darren Walls was a very highly ranked recruit coming out of high school. I'm actually looking up his recruiting profile right now. He was a guy that was ranked 51st by Rivals, 79th by ESPN, and I know Scout had him ranked very high as well. He was a very highly recruited, heavily thought of player, very similar to what Dorian Brew's recruiting profile is now. He's 49th and 57th on those two outlets. Rayshawn McNeil, I believe, was a very highly ranked guy coming out of high school. I know he was at least a top 100 guy by some. Gary Gray was a highly ranked guy coming out of high school as well. Rayshawn McNeil was ranked 43rd and 74th, and him and Darren Walls were in the same class. So, I mean, that's two top 100 cornerbacks in the same class. And then Gary Gray, who was in the next year's class, was ranked 13th by ESPN and 78th by Rivals. So Notre Dame, and this is what we say, the recruiting under Charlie Weiss was a different animal. So he was obviously, those were obviously years where they got guys every bit as highly ranked as what Dorian Brew is. So yeah, I mean, T. Shepard's another one. T. Shepard coming out of high school was a very highly ranked guy as well. So yeah, they've had guys like that before. That wouldn't be anything new. Now, would it be impactful? Heck yes, it'd be impactful. I'm not trying to take away from how big it would be to the 25 class. It would be huge. I mean, because two reasons. One is he's an incredible talent, and I think he fits Notre Dame exceptionally well. Number two is you're going to have to beat Ohio State to get him, and that would have a big impact on. Look, let's say if Notre Dame were to get a cornerback class next year, let's say they don't get Caleb Beasley, and they're going to take 3 corners next year, and they were to get Cree Thomas, Devin Williams, and Dorian Brew, I don't know how much better it could get. I mean, I really don't. That's a heck of a class. And here's what matters more. And this is what something Ryan and I talked about on Monday. It's not just about getting talented players. It's you had to beat Ohio State and Georgia for kids in their backyard to get them. What that would say for who Notre Dame is as a recruiting operation would be enormous. Now it's going to be tough because I don't know that you're going to be able to get Dorian Brew out of Ohio. I don't know that you're going to get Devin Williams out of Georgia, but it would be huge, absolutely huge. On top of the fact that you got really good football players. Next question from Nathan Milton, Super Chat. Thank you, Nathan. Hardest college football players' names to pronounce correctly. Well, I've always had a hard time with DJ Uiagalelei, and I still don't know if I'm saying that correctly. That's one I've always had a hard time with. We finally figured out how to pronounce Rook Orororo, is one we finally announced. But I have a hard time with a lot of the Samoan names, to be honest with you, because they're just not names I was familiar with growing up. And so, like, when I see Myron Tungavaloa or Tua Tungavaloa, I see Tagovailoa. And that's apparently not how you pronounce it. So those are ones that I have a harder time with. But right now it's DJ Uiagalelei. And now there's another one. Mateo is his younger brother. Mateo's now in college football. So I'm going to have to struggle with that one for a little while. I have another question from Corey Newman. What is the biggest threat to Notre Dame's independence? I would say the biggest threat to Notre Dame's independence is a scenario in which two power conferences emerge. They split off from the NCAA, and the postseason rule is you can't make the playoff if you're not in one of those two conferences. I think that would be the thing that would be the biggest threat to Notre Dame's independence. That's the only threat, in my opinion, to Notre Dame's independence is in a situation where Notre Dame is forced to go into a conference. I think if there's other scenarios in which Notre Dame may choose to do that, but as far as being forced to do it, I think that would be it right there. That would be it. John A1, which interior lineman, both offense and defense, is the quickest lateral mover? Also, which is the most flexible on the field? I mean, to me, it's Howard Cross on defense, and I don't think that there's anybody really close. Offensively, probably Billy Schrauth, probably be my answer there. So yeah, that'd be my answer for that one. Jordan Schreiber, why do you think we have so many other diehard fans of the other teams that listen to Irish Breakdown? Because they don't have great shows comparable. I can't imagine listening to shows for another team. I think it's, from talking to them, I think it's number one, we talk football, we talk ball, right? We don't do it in an obnoxious, homery way. I think that, ask Archer, why does he listen to the show? I mean, he can speak for himself. All these other guys, Roger Dodger, I think because whether they agree with us or not, and they often don't, it's because when we talk football, we do it as objectively as we can. So even if they disagree, I think Archer would tell you if he disagrees with me, he would say that at least I can make a case for why I believe what I believe. It's not a homer take per se. And we know football. We know the game. We talk the game. We're not just, two fans that started a show and, we talk ball, but we really don't know ball. I think that's it too. And I think they enjoy honest conversation. I think Antoine Jackson enjoys honest conversation. It's not because he loves Notre Dame. He loves college football on top of being, you're a Michigan fan, Ohio State fan, an LSU fan, other people like that. But I think they enjoy honest takes. And like we've had Frank McKittrie's been on our show before, right? He's an LSU fan. He knows I don't like Brian Kelly. He knows I can't but he also knows that we've given plenty of favorable things to say about LSU because that's just the reality. I dislike Brian Kelly enormously. I dislike most of the people that cover LSU. I think they're clowns. Not all of them, but the ones that I'm aware of. But that doesn't mean that Mike Denbrock's not a great guy or a very good coach, or that Matt House didn't do a good job, or that this guy wasn't a good hire, or that Shelton Sampson's not a stud. The film is what it is, right? So we're always going to be fair. So I can in one breath say, I don't like Brian Kelly. But in the next breath say, well, he did a great job getting his team ready to go play and beat Alabama. And I'm not going to spin it as like, oh, well, because I'm going to give you an honest take. And I think that's what most people care about. Look, man, it's like I love politics. I got 100 political books and economic books on my shelves upstairs. I can't listen to most politics nowadays because it's like, good, you're just giving me spin. You're just regurgitating like when I was younger. People know my political bents, right? They know that I'm a right-leaning person. Like I stopped watching Fox News years ago because it's like I'm just getting like RNC talking points at this point in time. And I want to be intellectually challenged, right? I want to listen to a left-leaning person that is giving a fair and honest take for why he believes that we should raise taxes. And then he and I can engage respectfully about why I think we should lower taxes. And it can be an honest, fun debate. He's making his case. I'm making my case. But so much of it nowadays is just spin and talking points and something that this president did that I hated because I didn't vote for him. And now the guy that I voted for is doing the exact same thing. And now I love that thing. I can't stand that. I hate that. I want intellectual honesty. And I think when you look at this show, agree with me or not, we're consistent. We're giving you honest opinions. We're open to being changed by data. And we're not just throwing homer takes at you where everything Notre Dame does is awesome. I can't stand that. And we get so much of that in politics and in sports. And people, man, I just want to talk ball. I don't want to have all that. And that's also why we don't talk politics here either, because this is a sports channel. Y'all don't want to hear me talking about politics. I don't want to hear me talking about politics on a channel like that. I can't stand turning on a sports show and listening to politics. So I don't want to hear it. So we're not going to do that. But we're going to be honest with you. And I think also we're welcoming too. We're not in here, Ohio State fans, you all suck, stay out of our channel. No, I point out the ones that are knuckleheads, and we'll point out the ones we like. And if you come in here respectfully, we're going to appreciate you. And here's another one that's big. This is a big one too. This is from Archer, who's an Ohio State fan. He said what Brian said, first of all. But he said, the vast majority of the people in the chat, the type of community Brian and the guys have cultivated, are easy to talk to and not the crazies of the fan base. And that's big. That's a huge one for me. And if someone's in here being disrespectful to someone of another fan who's not being disrespectful in return, we're going to say, hey, man, chill out. Be more respectful. And we don't allow that kind of stuff. Some people don't like that. And if that's cool, if you think you just come in this chat and act a fool, that's fine. You can think that. And then when I block you, you can go think that in somebody else's show. So that's going to be a thing too, is we're going to treat each other with a level of respect. We can disagree passionately. Well, there's always going to be a level of respect. And I think the other thing too is, guys, if you're really a fan of a team, you should be a fan of the sport. And I can't stand people who just aren't that. And the people that are like-minded like me are going to enjoy this show. That's what I think. All right, next question from Irish Chi-Town. Brian, who are your football mentors, and whom is responsible for your love for football in Notre Dame? So my love for Notre Dame comes from my dad. My dad was a Notre Dame fan. So when we watched college football, we watched Notre Dame. And so, of course, growing up in Northwest Ohio, we got a lot of Notre Dame games on TV. As far as my mentors in football, I've had several. I had a coach in the 7th grade and 8th grade. The first 2 years I played football, a guy named Don Hamilton. It's my middle school coach who really helped me in my love for the game. And he knew that I loved to study the game. And so he would challenge me on things. He would, he just really helped me realize, like, this is the impact a coach can have. Going into my professional career, I've said this before, and Coach Hamilton has passed away. And another coach who was impactful for me that has passed away is a guy named Mike Donnelly, who was my head coach at Muhlenberg College. Just a good, honest, decent man, incredibly smart coach. But he was someone who understood, like, it's not just about winning and losing. It's about, are you building up young men? And that was important to him. It's, if you're winning without that, then you're not really winning. But he also believed that you can win on the field while also developing young men to be successful young men in life. And that was a great, great lesson for me. And he was also a decent guy. And, he was one of those guys, he had plenty of opportunities to go coach at higher levels. Anyone around the program knows this, but he had younger kids. At the time that I knew him, he had a daughter in high school and a son, I think, in middle school. And his thing was, it was more important for him to be a present father than it was to be a Division I football coach. And so he made that decision. And I always respected him for that. And so there's been a lot of coaches I've learned football from that I don't consider mentors, because I could learn that from anybody. It's the people that I viewed as mentors are people that taught me the difference that you can make in the lives of young men, not just from a football standpoint, but, guys that'll look back. I've said this story about a player at Muhlenberg, and he told me about how this conversation he and I had when he was a freshman. He was thinking about transferring out of he was having a tough time. He was a starter for us. He's having a tough time in his degree program. And he and I had a chat, and apparently I encouraged him to stick with it, et cetera. Well, he's a dentist now. And he has told me that conversation impacted him. I don't even honestly remember the conversation, but it's such an honor to be able to say that yes, I've been a part of a national championship team and coached All-Americans and done all that, but those are the things that you look back on and say, that's why you do it. And that's what a coach is all about. And it was the people that mentored me and taught me those lessons that are the ones that I most appreciate and value. And if you're going to get into coaching, that needs to be at the heart of it. You can care about winning football games, and you should, while also still always prioritizing, am I developing young men to go be successful fathers and husbands and employees or employers and make a positive impact in society? If you're doing that, that's going to have a much, much longer lasting approach than the wins. And if you don't believe me, talk to anybody that played for Lou Holtz, and they're going to have great football stories, but they will all tell you it's the impact he had on me as a man, even at times when I didn't want what he was giving me. Looking back now, I'm the man I am today because of what he did. And I think those are things that should always be valued when you're talking about a football coach, in my view. Archer 452 with Ohio State out of the Bryce Underwood race. Where would you predict he ultimately ends up? Does Notre Dame try to make a big push for him or keep pushing their chips in on Deuce? They're not gonna. I mean, look, if you can recruit him all you want, Bryce Underwood's a phenomenal player, but they're not gonna get him. So I wouldn't put too much. Look, Deuce Knights may not be as good as Bryce Underwood now. He's phenomenally talented. That's not a secondary consolation prize for me. I would absolutely still be on Deuce, and because you're not going to get Bryce Underwood. So why waste your time? You have to be smart in those regards. You have to allocate your resources properly in recruiting. Irish Chi-Town, if you had to cover another university besides Notre Dame, which teams would be in the discussion? Honestly, Irish Chi-Town, it would be either a Virginia school or a North Carolina school, something like UVA, North Carolina, something like that. And the reason it was simple, it's family, because my family lives in Virginia. They live in the Virginia Beach area. And if I was not going to be covering Notre Dame, I would much rather be close to home and where I could, one of the things that does bum me out sometimes is, I'm not able to be around my nieces and my nephew and watch them grow up the way that I would if I was there. I mean, I see them a couple times a year and I try to talk to them and stuff, but it's hard to stay in contact with a 10-year-old and a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old if you're not there and you're not present in their lives. And, that always kind of bums me out that I'm not able to see them more because they're awesome kids. And I don't get to see my mom. I mean, I talk to my parents all the time. I have very close relations with my parents, but not being able to be around them is one of the bummers of this job. But there's so many other great parts of it that it makes it worth it. But if I couldn't cover Notre Dame anymore, if they disbanded the football team tomorrow and I still wanted to do this, I'd probably cover UVA, North Carolina, Duke, something like that. And they just live in that region. Then I could come home a lot more and be around my family. So, maybe Old Dominion. I don't know if I can make enough money just covering Old Dominion. That would obviously be the easiest because I live near there. But part of me, just for other personal reasons, I think I might rather live in North Carolina than Virginia at this point in time for reasons that have nothing to do with sports. Cajun Domer, did you think the 2012 team had a chance to win the Natty at the time? I did. I still believe the team would have beaten Ohio State or Kansas State if they weren't suspended or stumbled to Baylor. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I thought if things went right, they had a shot to beat Bama. And I still feel like if the Manti stuff didn't happen, that would have been a much more competitive game. Would they have won if they could have forced some turnovers? But yeah, I thought they did, sure. And once Baylor beat K-State, that was crushing because they had a much better shot at beating K-State than Alabama. Domer Grizz asks, what is the one thing you're most concerned could keep us from winning a national championship this year? Could it be a position group, coach, circumstance, or other factor? Injuries is a big one. Skill players not being as good as you hope, not being able to make big plays. Those are really kind of the two that would fall in line for me. Yeah. So this is funny from Detroit Hunter. So, wouldn't take up my offer to be the media manager at the University of Washington. And he says, yeah, Brian and Seattle don't mix. No, buddy. That would definitely not be the case. Me in Seattle and Portland and pretty much anywhere on the West Coast would probably not fit super great. So yeah, you won't be seeing me doing those ones. Oregon would be a fun team to cover though. I think if it wasn't for the fact if I didn't have to live in Oregon or at least that part of Oregon. There's some parts of Oregon that are beautiful. I've actually been out to Oregon before. But there's other parts of Oregon that would be like, nah, I'm good. Adam Shipley says, with Pete Pavakwa being a former player, do you see Notre Dame being more aggressive with big-time assistant coach hires? And my answer would be, I hope so. But I don't know that him being a walk-on punter really means that I think he's going to be this pro football guy beyond what we've seen in the past. I don't know that that's if that equals it's going to happen. I hope it happens that way. But yeah, I don't know if that's the case. Nathan Milton with a super chat. Don't be cheap, Brian. Go to Ireland with Ryan. So Ryan's already stated he can't go to Ireland. Ryan also doesn't cover the team. If I was going to fly anybody to Ireland, it would be me and Angela, and it would probably be Sean Steyer, since he's kind of my beat writer right now. So that would make a lot more sense. So it would be that. But yeah, we're and he says I'm obviously kidding. So I know, Nathan, we're all good, man. But you did do a super chat, which I thank you for. So I had to bring it up. Getting down to some of the final questions here. We got one from Levi Perez. If there were ever a circumstance that caused Notre Dame to have to join a conference, such as losing access to the playoff, what conference would you want to see Notre Dame join? Right now, the way that they are right now, it's the ACC, and it's easy. It's just a conference that geographically makes a lot of sense from a recruiting standpoint. It's a conference filled with schools that, for the most part, are much more similar to Notre Dame in size and scope, in emphasis from an academic standpoint. So it would be the ACC. And it's not even a tough question for me. I would absolutely be part of the ACC if I had to join a conference, and it was still a thing. So that would be my answer. It's a good question. Brian, do you consider yourself an influencer? I don't know if I consider myself one. I don't really think about it. I would hope so. I would hope the things that we do influence people to think about the game differently, to think about different topics differently, to engage the game differently. So sure. I mean, I don't know. I haven't really thought of it that way, but I hope so. I don't know. But honestly, though, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what other people think. It matters what y'all think. So you guys are the ones that determine that, right? Like, I can go out there and say tomorrow, hey, I'm this. Say, well, okay, nobody cares, so you're not that. Like, you can call yourself whatever you want, but it doesn't mean you're that. So I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I just look. I will say this: do I want to be an influencer? It depends on what you mean by that. If you're talking about like a social media influencer, I don't care about that. Do I want to be someone that when I kneel before God, I can look back and say, you know what, like I brought joy to people's lives. I made people take something that they love and enjoy it maybe better. Did I live out a lifestyle that, flawed as I might be, that people still see, that I stress the importance of being a good husband, or, a Christian, or things like that? I hope so. I hope I have that influence. But it just kind of comes down to I'm going to be myself, and I'm going to do things that I love, and hope that there's enough people out there that enjoy it, that, to help us do it for a job. That'd be my thing. But I think that's more determined by other people, more so than me. But thank you for asking. Pete Weber says, Brian, we're going to need your top recipes or what you use as rubs on your meats for the grill. So I'm going to be honest with you, Pete Weber. So I don't do a lot of grilling. And, so I don't, I have a grill. I haven't used it once this summer. I'm going to need to, but honestly, when I grill, I'm like a steak. I'm just more like a salt and pepper kind of guy. I did get a new rub that I enjoy, that I like a lot, but I actually enjoy cooking steaks inside now, because I have a technique and a way of doing it now, a technique now that just really enjoy it. But I make really good chicken fettuccine Alfredo, and you can make it shrimp fettuccine Alfredo if you prefer that as well, because the meat's the easy part. But and I make it so the way that I make, because there's two different ways you can make Alfredo, like fettuccine Alfredo. One is sort of the Americanized way and that's how I do it. So I take a chicken breast, I cut it up into chunks. I put garlic salt, a little garlic powder on it. put a little olive oil on the plate, heat it up, and then just cook that. And then while I'm doing that, I'll start making the Alfredo sauce. And I basically just put a half a stick of butter. Depending on how much I'm making, I'll put heavy whipping cream and then a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, and then shredded Parmesan cheese. If you can get fresh shredded Parmesan cheese, like it's like finely shredded, like, but not like the stuff that you put on top of a salad, not that, but actual like shredded Parmesan, Parmigiano Reggiano, as they call it, right? So actual shredded Parmesan cheese, and then let that cook. And the thing I've learned that is a lot of recipes would say, hey, bring it to a boil, but it wouldn't. I didn't like the consistency of it. So what I do now is I let it cook twice as long as they say. So I let it cook for about 10 minutes, and it gets it really thickens up, and you put it in there and you cook it that way. I have not done it this other way, but I've also seen it done online where people actually say you just take butter and Parmesan and you put that in the noodle, and then you cook it. So then once that's done, you put that with the way I did, you put it with the noodles and then add the chicken, that kind of thing. So, that's one that I make. I make chicken parm. My wife likes my chicken parm. Now here's something I do differently for chicken parm is I don't actually cook it in the sauce because I don't like how soggy it gets. So what I do is I actually cook it. I'll bread it, and then I'll put the mozz on it. And you can cook it with just shredded mozz or like sliced mozz. Sliced mozz tends to be the best, but shredded mozz is really good too if you're getting fresh mozz. But so I'll cook it that way, and then I'll put it on the plate, and then I'll put like a little side of the marinara sauce, or I'll use sometimes a meat sauce, and then dip it in there. So you still get the marinara, but it doesn't cook it into it because I don't love marinara. But you get a crunchier texture of your chicken and the breading. But you're still getting the marinara mixed with it. So that's how I do chicken parm. I even order that way. If I ever get it at like Olive Garden or something, I'll order it without the marinara cooked on. So those are some of my favorite ones. I make a lot of things for my wife that I don't make for myself. So I've made her a lot of different things, but I think those are things that I probably enjoy the most. I like making bread. So just making homemade bread as well. So, but I've changed my diet recently, so there's a lot of things that I like to eat that I'm just not eating as much of lately. So it's making me a little sad. But yeah, I said I made the stuffed chicken the other day. That was really good, but I put a little bit too much mozzarella in there, and it overwhelmed it. So I definitely go a lot lighter on the mozzarella. A little bit of mozzarella goes a long way, man. I think most of you that cook know that. There's no doubt about it. And I actually had someone reach out for that rub that we do for our turkey that I talked about last week. So somebody did reach out to that. All right, let's go to the next question. And that would be from Pete Weber. A genie grants you $20,000. You have to spend it on a 2-week vacation. You cannot save the money. Where do you go and why? I'd go back home. I'd go see my family. I don't get a chance to do that. So if I had to go on vacation, I'd probably, if I had 20 grand, I'd get a nice Airbnb where we could have the dogs and go visit my family. That's probably what I'd do. If you took that away and say, okay, you can't go to your family, they're out of town on a vacation too. Honestly, I'd probably get an RV and I'd probably just go sightseeing for a couple weeks, like just driving around, checking out all different parts of the country. And that'd be a lot of fun. I've always wanted to do stuff like that. Okay, Grant, with a question. What kind of player do you think Matt James would have been if he did come to Notre Dame? That's a good question. I think he would have been a starter. I think he would have been a good player. He was a big, powerful kid. I think he'd been a good player. That's still a sad thing when you think about that. For those who don't know, Matt James signed with Brian Kelly's first class, and I believe he fell off a balcony on spring break and passed away. It's a very sad, tragic situation, but I think he was a big, powerful kid. He was not a great athlete, but he's a good enough athlete, especially in that system. I think he would have been like a Taylor Decker type of guy. I thought he was a really good football player. Really good football player. Trevor Rocket says, Brian, who is the best player you ever played against as a player or as a coach or both? So it's between one of two guys. I always thought, like, at the time, the best guy that I ever played against was Dre Bly. So Dre was the better player in high school. Plexico Burris ended up having the better NFL career. But Dre Bly was the best guy that I ever played against. Best guy I ever coached against was probably Miles Austin. I don't know if you guys remember Miles Austin, but he played at Monmouth. He played wide receiver for the Cowboys. Probably him. I don't think Pierre Garçon was on that Mount Union team that I coached against, but they had a running back named Chuck Moore who was phenomenal on that 2001 Mount Union team. So he was He was really good, but Miles Austin would be my pick for best guy that I've ever coached against. So Dre Bly and Plexico Burst are the two best players I ever played against, and those were both in high school. All right, let's. I think that's going to be it, everybody. I'm just looking here. Ryan had to leave. The power just went out, so hopefully things are okay over there. But yeah, so that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. 7 minutes, so 5 o'clock. We have the IB Nation Sports Talk Rapid Fire, so definitely want to go check that out. It'll be Sean and Jesse tonight. So definitely want to check that out. Folks, hit that like button for us. I would have greatly appreciate that. Hit that notification bell. We are doing a show tomorrow. So make sure you check in to see what time that's going to be. We'll either go live at 10 a.m. or maybe later. We will react to the Bronte Johnson commitment. He's going to decide tomorrow between Notre Dame, Tennessee, and Purdue. So we'll break that down. Tons of great content coming out. Lots of good stuff going on. You're definitely going to check that out. Do us a favor and sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We would really greatly appreciate that. Just the community that we have here, we're trying to also build there. Even if you're not a Notre Dame fan, you can, as long as you're respectful, I'll also demand that people be respectful to you as well. So that's certainly something you can do. And you can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Until then, however, until tomorrow, we will see you again soon. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the rapid fire with Sean and Jesse tonight. Have an awesome rest of your day. Stay safe, and we'll see you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.